You're not real. You're not real.
What? You are? Is any of it real? I mean, look at this. Look at it! A world built on fantasy. Synthetic emotions in the form of pills. Psychological warfare in the form of advertising. Mind-altering chemicals in the form of food. Brainwashing seminars in the form of media. Controlled, isolated bubbles in the form of social networks. Real? You want to talk about reality? We haven't lived in anything remotely close to it since the turn of the century. We turned it off, took out the batteries, snacked on a bag of GMOs while we tossed the remnants in the ever-expanding dumpster of the human condition. We live in branded houses, trademarked by corporations, built on bipolar numbers, jumping up and down on digital displays, hypnotizing us into the biggest slumber mankind has ever seen. You have to dig pretty deep, kiddo, before you can find anything real. We live in a kingdom of bullshit.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours.
August 27th, 2024. Thank you for joining me today. Now you have to bear with me and forgive me for not wearing my coat today. As you might have heard circulating on social media, I hurt a tendon in my arm, which has been one of the reasons I have been not getting to a show recently, but I've got a lot to catch up on. So it'll be momentary, hopefully, and I've been trying to rest it in general, but it's not in me to not do a show for this long. And so I essentially stressed a little bit today, but I think it's important to continue to do this. Probably going to take the tomorrow off, I'm thinking, depending on how it feels, but just bear with me on that. But I got a lot of great stuff to talk about today. Well, a lot of terrible things, but also some good stuff to start with today that I wanted to share with you. So first off, I wanted to say before I forgot, we had some issues with the audio, not just recently, and I found out that the audio wasn't as up to the usual standard that we expect. And it was a simple issue that was something to do with the soundboard. In general, just let me know and make it a usual thing to let me know if something seems amiss. If the audio, the video, which you guys usually do, but let me know in the chat. Let me know if everything sounds like it should and not like I'm speaking through some kind of a tin can. Because I'm, put the effort in to make this all as good as it can be. So let's make sure I don't have a simple setting wrong. So, it doesn't sound as good. So let me know on that. Now, I also want to say for those of you in this community, there's a part of our community who is a central foundational part of this group, which is Orwell in the chat. And I want you guys to know, if you aren't in communication with her, that she's going through a pretty tough time with her animal in her life. And I don't know how you guys feel about this, but for me, I mean, this is part of my family. And it's a really difficult thing for people to go through. Hopefully everything will turn out okay, but I just wanted you guys to know, send your love, your thoughts, love and positive energy to her. Reach out to her. Ultimately, she'll need support with this in general. So if you have the ability, reach out to her, let her know that you're there for her. Now, I want to start with two things today. Now, generally what we're going to talk about, it's a little bit all over the place because I'm really just trying to get back into the swing. I mean, I've been trying to pay attention, but as you know, at least the way I like to be immersed in kind of like the moment to moment of what's going on. And I'm just trying to kind of get caught up and discuss a few things over the last over the week, so many days in general. But I'm going to focus to start and I wasn't even planning on this because I just did a focus kind of on Israel in general. I wanted to talk more about the medical side of this, which honestly, I might end up getting into more of the ongoing development in regard to the monkeypox direction if we have time. Otherwise, it'll be on the next show, and I'll keep saying that. But it's more based on what I think is most pressing in this moment, and I'm sure people will disagree with that. My point, though, is that, where was I going? Oh, that ultimately that I put a big focus on Israel to start today because I want to make a point about that gets into the second part today. For the people that are leaning in, I mean, really just the reality of our current political dynamic and the people that are pretty much everybody, it seems, except Jill Stein, openly supporting the ongoing genocide and how alarming that is. So I want to make sure we're aware of some of the most current things happening right now and then go into that the conversation about what I perceive to be this very large manipulation taking place. I mean, unprecedented, even from within the two-party illusion. And for me, if those of you that know my opinion on this, I very strongly believe that we're dealing with our government, not different angles and parts. I mean, there are definitely different vying positions and power shifts, but at the end of the day, we're just dealing with the government as a power structure that recognizes they are better equipped to manipulate us as a whole when they're not battling each other where it matters. And I think that's something we have to consider. That's just power structures in a general sense. But I think more than just the two-party illusion in general, we are watching this kind of filter down into something that I've been talking about pretty consistently over the last so many weeks. The alarming reality of the drive for Donald Trump and then his next election. Now, look, you don't have to agree that the selection conversation and that it's between two sides of the same government. That still makes the same point for me. That what we need to be concerned about, if you believe that's how it goes and that your vote translates, which is certainly possible. I disagree with the evidence, but I could be wrong. That ultimately it's still two sides of the same entity. Whether we're talking about Zionism, whether we're talking about digital IDs, whether we're talking about any number of important points that are outside the wedge issues that really seem to stay the same either way, regardless. But I'm watching this drift into a very alarming direction. The point being where we need to care about who these people really are, not just care about how bad the other side is being projected to you, but care about who they really are, about their principles, their integrity, what they stand for, not just what they say, but what their history shows about them. And I think this is really important to consider. So I want to start with a point about what I've mentioned this recently about, and the other point is we're going to get into GM mosquitoes because I wanted to talk about it based on a current conversation going around. We're going to talk about, if we have time, the medical aspect, monkeypox, and a couple of other related issues and digital IDs, obviously from the title. All of this will tie in, as you'll see throughout the conversation, for multiple reasons. That being said, I want to start with a conversation about this term blackpilled. This seems to be kind of shifted toward, it's being thrown at people like us right now, myself included, in the TLAV community and plenty of others that are historically very active about calling out the two-party illusion. Now, two things to talk about here. One is the reality of what blackpilled means, and then the reality of what we're actually saying. So blackpilled, if you don't know, I'm not even fond of the term, quite frankly. I don't see a place for a term that means we're all screwed. I mean, I think it ultimately boils down to the idea that you think there's no solving the problem, that we're going to fail, that it's all screwed. There's a level of that in the conversation, but obviously I agree. There's no fruitful part of that. Like, even if you think that, then why are you adding it? The point is, we're all trying to solve things here. We're trying to find paths forward that benefit people. And that's obviously what we're trying to do, despite what people are trying to frame it as. My point in describing it first is to see that that's clearly, anybody objective can see that that's not what we're doing, even if we are on the side that right now the choices being presented are all bad. That's very different than thinking, screw it, we're all going to lose anyway. The reality is, hypothetically, let's just say we looked and we saw all, quite frankly, I think that's what we're dealing with, but villains. Just in whatever you imagine as like the most obvious example of murderers and thieves and villains and whatever else. And you looked up and every one of them were outwardly obvious. The point should not be that that's all that exists. The point is, why are those the only choices we're being given? And to say that that is a black-pilled response, it's saying that the reality is accepting that you failed. The reality, which is what I see it as, that these people are it's coordinated and construct to get you to pick within the chosen reality that goes in all the same direction. To say that that's not the direction and say that that is you giving up is to hide the other 99% of what's going on in the world. This is the two-party paradigm. Now, we're going to talk about this in the context of I've been saying this for a while, actually. The Republican side of this, rather more so calling themselves patriots and saying, well, yes, all the Republicans are just joining with the Democrats. So we see the two-party illusion. It's all a uniparty. And now but that's the two-party illusion. You're literally still voting for a Republican. So all you're really doing is breaking off in a smaller fraction of that same dynamic and saying, we're the ones that see it. The Republicans are just with the Democrats. So you're just now the Democrats and the Patriots. That's it's the same. If you're still voting in the same system, that's how I see that. Now, yes, I could be wrong. Frankly, I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that somebody will change this for the better simply by checking a box. Wouldn't that be easy? I don't think that's the reality. So I'm going to start with a point about what somebody's saying to kind of set the tone for what this conversation is, and I'll go more into the explanation. And then I'm going to point out something that we're announcing that Derek just recently tweeted, And I want to make sure you guys fully understand with full transparency what it is that we're trying to accomplish so it doesn't get misrepresented by the people who are already trying to misrepresent what we think. And it is everywhere. It's not just in this current situation. In fact, I was just butting up against somebody about this. I'm not even going to name who the person is that's been sharing this because, frankly, it's very disappointing to me that somebody I used to think was, I don't know, cared, was honest, would make this kind of ridiculous accusation without evidence. But that somebody was putting out the idea that I was somehow completely bought into like the Sound of Freedom movie. And I know there are varying opinions about people in this community. You guys know how I covered that. I simply highlighted the movie. I highlighted that clearly there is a sex trafficking industry and clearly there is a problem to be addressed. That in and of itself was being labeled QAnon. My point was, well, that's silly. There's obviously a problem. And then I was pointing out that the film was being alarmingly used in a partisan sphere, which I stressed skepticism. And that was it. That's all I really covered on that because I felt like it was weirdly being, remember I told you guys I didn't even watch it because I don't see the interest in watching not a documentary, but a movie about something terrible like that. It's something I wouldn't enjoy. The point is that is a narrative going around that I'm somehow promoting and bought into this psyop that was this. And I keep seeing it brought up. My point is that there are people out there who are invested in misrepresenting what very particular people have to say. And that shouldn't, in the same vein of being objective, make you assume or blindly say that means that we're honest. I know that we're honest, but the point is that that's not the way to look at things. It should be proven to you. But my point is they're lying about us for whatever interest that they have, whoever was doing that. I personally think it is because we are honest. It is because we are objective and completely nonpartisan. I think that's a threat. I think that's an obvious and overwhelming threat to what is currently dissolving. We were watching the current control structure fall apart in every possible way. And this is about trying to consolidate that control. That's the technocracy conversation. During COVID-19, the conservative part of this, not the Republicans are only invested in team sport politics, but the conservatives out there who identify in that way, the ideals around conservatism and they believe in those things and they ultimately still see parts of the lies. They saw it during COVID-19. We saw how they were trying to drive us into this technocratic panopticon because we're now in a position where we're able to circumvent their control structure. So they want to get past that. My point is now we've skipped past this to where the very same people, rather the people trying to lead the conservatives, are trying to aggressively drive you into that same position using different conversations, using the border conversation, using immigration, using all sorts of different overlaps. Catherine Austin Fitts has been talking about this a lot. We're going to be interviewing her here in the studio coming up soon, and that's what we're going to focus on, sort of lifting the veil around Israel and the Trump conversation. And it's very alarming to what we're seeing here with RFK joining and now Gabbard joining the conversation. There's a very clear and interesting problem there. And so what's important to see is that people trying to misrepresent that conversation, ask yourself what it is they're trying to hide. Why would they have to lie about what we think in order to keep that from your view? I think it's because it's an obvious threat. Now, leave it there for now, and we're going to get into some other points around this I think are important, and you'll see as we go through. But I wanted to start with this. And by the way, bear with me. I'm going to be slower at moving things, and you'll see. There's going to be probably, I'm sure, little moments where I make the wrong move. I only got my left hand here right now, so just bear with me. So here's where I want to start. Now I don't even want to get into the actual conversation that preceded this. You guys can read it. It'll be in the show notes, just because I think it'll distract from the main point. But I like just a thought here is somebody who I respect. I think she's very objective. I think she's got a very clear handle on the two-party illusion. And my point is, if you just look at her Twitter thread, I think she has very clear principles that she upholds. I think that's important. I think that's paramount, quite frankly, in this conversation today. That doesn't mean that we have to agree with everything that another person thinks, but we can at least acknowledge that they stand by what they think consistently. That should matter to all of us. And I do agree with, I think our stances are very similar. So she says this in regard to an ongoing conversation. All this vitriol because I questioned this person saying things on their show about what's going to happen with RFK and Trump is going to change things. It's historic, whatever, right? So this person responds. And by the way, my opinion is what she's saying is pretty valid. I think ultimately what she's highlighting is that there's a lot of people And I'm not going to say all dishonest. I think there are people that are just being snowed by this, that are falling into the trap that's being presented by RFK and Trump and this whole thing. It's all going to, I mean, I hope, as always, I really hope that I'm wrong and they're going to change everything for the better. But I think it's quite obvious these people are not what they pretend to be. Not RFK, not Trump, not any of them. If we're being objective and not blinded by the partisan game. This person responds by saying, and this is my point, you're one of those black pillars. I'm telling you, there's a real big thing going around about this. Now, before I even say it, read it all, the point about this has been a comment. Black pill as a term used to be something that was used as like at least as I saw it, like almost not a positive, but sort of like I see it more than you do. I'm black pilled. Like I get it. You guys don't see the problem yet. You don't see how bad it really is. That's kind of how it first started. But what I'm seeing now, and you'll see, it's turned into an accusation from people who are tapped into the paradigm saying, you're just black pilled. Like you just don't see that we're the adults in the room and you have to make a rational compromise to make this work. And sometimes that can be the case, but you'll see that how dishonest this is about a lot of people like Derek, primary in this conversation, who is doing near almost the primarily solutions outside the political spectrum. How in the world you can call that black pilled is beyond me. He's the best example to make in this. But it says you're one of those black pillars who thinks you're super edgy and clever for opposing everyone. But she's not doing that. She's not opposing everyone. She's only opposing the people within his controlled paradigm, one left or right. If you actually ask her opinion, she'll give you all sorts of other things to talk about other than the controlled left-right paradigm. But it says, and opposing everyone all the time, nobody could pass your purity test. You'll hear these two things, purity test, black pill. You're getting the same kind of, this is what happens when these things filter through the two-party controlled system and the people that are lost in it. You get the same recycled narratives. And it says for you, and I'm not saying that's necessarily what he's dealing with. He could have just come up with it on his own, but kind of don't think so when you can see the same things being said. You guys can decide for yourselves. It says for you, it's for you, the perfection or bust. But either way, you get his point. Like it's perfection or bust, like a utopian Bolshevik. Of course, really trying to throw in the buzzword to get people to reject the idea that we should want perfection. Like, just to be clear, I highly doubt we're ever going to get perfection, but should we not strive for that? That's the second point. My point is that's not even what she's actually saying. But it's interesting to think about that. So we're genuinely being told right now that if you can't find the positive between the lesser of two evils, then you're just a child, that you don't really understand how this works. Do you feel that that's true? Everyone out there listening, do you feel that we really are being told by the adults in the room that the only thing we should expect is one of the two Zionists being given to us? Let's even remove the Zionist point. So I know in a lot of ways that gets people to drive the other direction because it's so blinded. The game has been like, that is such a constant issue right now that some people have chosen to just, you say Zionist, then I'm on the other side. But the point is, to get just Trump and Kamala, are we really going to pretend those are the two best people to run this country? I mean, there are other options, you understand. They're not even considering those things. But for you just want good for this country, you child. It's like, that seems to be the precedent. Obviously, they think that these things will bring good, but the reality is the whole conversation is the other side is just worse. And we all know that right now. So she responds by saying, you do not know me. He's wrong about her. Your opinion on my character has nothing to do with what I posted. And that's usually how it goes, right? Straw man attacks, subjective arguments, assumptive points. Either debate what was said or move on. He says, I scrolled your timeline. Wow, you're against everyone and everything. No, again, I challenge you to look for yourself. She's against the paradigm, the controlled illusion that we're pretending represents everything. Again, if you actually asked her opinion as opposed to forcing what you think it is onto her state, you would see that there are other things that she would put forward. And it says, who would you support? And he finally gets to that. So wouldn't you start with that? If you're going to say, you think this and that, wouldn't you just start by going, hey, I don't know what you actually think. Why don't you let me know? That's not how Twitter works, right? It says, who gets in before you call for a purity spiral? I don't even know what that means. She says simply, I do not want rulers. I don't hide that. Why do you? And funny how he doesn't respond after that, because what are you going to say? The point is that all we're really talking about is that we want actual freedom and liberty, not, awful but lawful or awful but lawful or whatever, the game where it's freedom of speech, not freedom of reach. We'll give you a part of what you should actually have without us being dictating what you like. That's the game. These are not things that they should have the right to say, we're going to limit this for you. Now, I'm not even really talking about the Twitter platform and the illusion that this is some kind of an individual company and not simply an extension of the government. That's my opinion. I'm talking about all of this together. And the idea that what we're actually discussing is not, it's about control versus actual liberty and freedom. And I think that's what it comes down to. Now, you don't have to agree with my opinion or with what you think, but I challenge you to stand back and look at what we're actually discussing, what we're talking about every day. And whether we're highlighting bigger problems in the world or simply just saying that and again, it comes down to the finer point of, if you can't acknowledge that Trump, Operation Warp Speed, or Kamala, and I mean, you can go off on both of their track records and show how they've been caught lying, show how they are not what they present themselves to be, or RFK Jr., or Walls, or any of them. And if you are unwilling to consider those things because, well, you're just going to let Kamala win, my point is you don't really care about the truth because you're ultimately hiding from it. And then if you get pressed on it, the point is, well, they're better anyway, but you ignore those things. And I think this is the larger problem. This is all just my opinion about this. Now, this is why we're starting this. Now, I want to be very clear about this. I guarantee this will be misrepresented as some kind of a coordinated, like we're working before somebody else. It's always how this works. Feel free to dive through this. Feel free to look at our track records. Feel free to look at what we present, who we get our funding from, which, by the way, is you, for all of us. I mean, specifically speaking for us, for TLAV in general, for Whitney, for Derek, who have their own platforms as well. Look at if this ends up being about how we're some kind of insider manipulation and all it's based on is that influencer said so, maybe stand back and ask if it's actually true, seeing as how much is being lied about today. I'm only saying that because I already know where this is going, and this is why we're doing this. So let me read this first, and I'll have some more comments. So Derek put this out. Whitney, Derek, and I were talking about this offline over yesterday, or day before yesterday into today. And we sent this out to a big group of people. Here's what it says, basically via email, that we all decided we wanted to post it so you guys could see what we're actually doing. Transparency is important. It says, myself, Whitney Webb, and TLAV are organizing an alliance of independent media specifically focused on individuals who have been consistently correct and principled. That's huge to me. In their reporting on 3 core issues: COVID-19, COVID-1984, the illusion therein, Israel's assault on Palestine, and the two-party deception. We are reaching out to several people who fit this bill with the intention of forming an alliance. Now, that's not necessarily like a network per se, really just an overlapping alliance of what we all see going on and helping promote. And in some cases, working on, like we're talking about like a news feed kind of conversation, but it's all going to build as we go forward. And it says, our reasoning behind this is related to concerns that already rampant social media censorship will continue to sideline critical voices of dominant narratives, as well as concerns that it is important to organize to promote voices and viewpoints that focus more on directly tackling dangerous policy agendas, i.e. digital IDs, CBDCs, etc., and not on promoting branded politicians and related distractionary drama. Now, on that point's important. Because you can argue, and you can have the mind that Trump genuinely wants to fight those things, and I disagree, but that's your opinion. The point is not about debating whether Trump is the guy. The point is removing that from the conversation, not promoting branded politicians and related distractionary drama. If somebody makes an action that we think is in the good direction, stopping the things we disagree, then good. I promote that. Trump, Kamala, I don't care. It's your government, guys. If they do something based on what we're driving them to do, that's a positive action, we will go, yes, that's good. Not blindly ignore it because we hate Trump or Kamala, which is what we see in the two-party illusion and a lot of the people trapped within this and a lot of the talking heads that get pulled into that. A lot of them I've seen over the years that I think started with a genuine intention have gotten pulled into the orbit of some of these manipulators, and I think they self-censor. I really do. But the point is avoiding all of these things, having the conversation where it's necessary about how they play a factor, but not choosing sides against each other. And it says some of the potential actions we are considering include, and it's all potential, it's very new, a weekly, bi-weekly joint newsletter to highlight Alliance members' work relevant to exposing the agendas above, particularly over the next 2 months as we approach the U.S. election. 2, weekly or bi-weekly panel conversations about these topics. I would argue I would desire, but it's based on everyone else's choice, that those be public. That's what I would want. Joint investigations highlighting the co-opting of the freedom movement. That's important. And how the U.S. election is playing a role. We are specifically only interested in collaborating with people who were correct from the beginning on these issues. Now, that's not the intention to box out anybody that ultimately recognized the problem and then really did call it out, but this is just a starting point to understand. It's about principle and about people that have shown that they're willing to stand by that. And it says invitations to this small alliance have already been sent and more will be likely sent. To those in the audience who see the insanity that we see, hold tight to your critical thinking. We are going to do our best to unite the independent media, the outlets within, and individuals who still have principles to collaborate how we can push back against the quickly emerging mainstream alternative media. We need your support now more than ever. Stay tuned for details on how to support. Now, we're very motivated about this. You're going to see things happening here. We've already got a lot of response, but I think it's very important that we get ahead of what will no doubt be framed around this conversation. All I ask is that you do your due diligence. That if a claim is circulated about what this is or what we look into it. I challenge you to actually look into the narrative, the claim, and find for yourself that we are exactly what we present. We are exactly what we put forward, and it's easy to check. I really feel positive about where this is going, even though we're in a pretty frustrating and dangerous time, because I feel more pressure to pull people into the paradigm now more than ever. And again, my point in the beginning, because it's more possible than ever to actually change it. So thank you for your consideration on this. I think it's important. Make sure you reach out and share this if you got thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. Now, Derek put out an article, or technically we had an interview that we just put out on the 26th. And it's just wanted to make sure you saw it before we get into everything else. It's a great discussion. And of course, if you haven't seen it, realizing that says with a lowercase s, dang it. U.S. government's fluoride report finally released and the two-party obsession. Now, I'm not going to blame that on my sling, but let's go ahead and say that anyway, since it was, I had this sling in my arm. But anyway, this is a great conversation for one, because if you haven't seen it, the report that came out, it's what Derek has been busting his butt on around this conversation for years or more, well before he's been doing it for TLAV. The reality of fluoride being dangerous for you, which is exactly what it finds. And they're still trying to water this down. They're still desperately trying to hide the reality from this. Your government, all sides of it, are actively trying to keep this in your water, as we already know and have for a long time, because of other peer-reviewed studies, that it's hurting you and lowering the IQ of your children and causing hormone disorder, all sorts of things. And then we also talk about this general premise because it's on our minds, the two-party obsession, the reality of what this means. We talk about RFK and Trump and where that's going. Now, let's start with this point, really just kind of a quick point about censorship and Twitter. That I feel like it's important, whether or not it's about the bigger conversation we're having, because of what a prominent point this is right now. And then we're going to get into some Israel conversation and bring this back around, because all of this connects, in my opinion, to the two-party illusion obsession. Now, here's a clip I think is important, because really, this is the starting point for what I was just saying. That if we are incapable of acknowledging the contradiction here, we need to, rather, people that can see that and might still be on the side of where we need to reflect on that. If you can't acknowledge that what's going on Twitter is not what they're telling you it is, now like I've said, I have my account back. That's better than not having it. And I would argue that there is differences in positive ways right now. But I've always said, based on what we can clearly see, that this is a very, very surreptitious, more manipulative time around this. It's not just blanket, blunt censorship. There's far more going on. That's my opinion, but I think it's quite obvious with bots and fifth generation warfare type of tech directions. So when we're seeing this, and we see them continue to to promote that we are the ones fighting for free speech, we're pushing back against censorship, him tweeting things that seem to suggest that, laughing about how everyone else is censoring, while we can prove that they are censoring people right now, in particular around Israel. But I've seen things censored around vaccine conversations. I've seen accounts deleted for these things. We've talked about this. It's just that the people who are invested in him as an ideologue, for the next Trump selection, don't want to see it or don't want to point it out. But that doesn't apply to all the other conservatives out there that recognize it and might just be uncomfortable pointing it out because of that. There's where you need to have principle and stand up and say, no, this is wrong. I still believe in Trump, but this is not true. Elon is censoring people. They are suppressing them. They are working with a Zionist genocidal government to take your biometric data. Yes, that's still happening. They're using CHEQ to flood this platform with bots. Yes, easy to prove. I mean, we need to be clear about that. And so this is a point about general censorship. Here is what he posted on the 25th. He posted a clip of him blanket saying moderation is censorship. I mean, we realize that they're moderating on this platform, right? I'm going to play the clip next of Yacarino that was made by Casey Wright, showing her openly acknowledging that we're and Elon nodding along. So my point is simple. I'm not saying you have to disagree with that moderation might be needed in some cases. You can decide that if you want. I disagree with the real idea of free speech. But my point is that you can't pretend over here that moderation's bad and go, yay, he's saving free speech, and then pretend that they're not doing exactly that, or partnering with GARM in some kind of illusion of fighting back and nothing. I mean, there's so many weird dynamics here that people are trying to ignore. So let's play this clip first.
Censorship is what you're saying.
No, I don't love censorship.
Then why are you asking?
I believe in moderation, but I don't believe in
censorship. Moderation is a propaganda word for censorship.
Okay, right there. So by that logic and his pushback that got him a lot of attention, yeah, Don Lemon sucks, which I agree, and he's the one pushing back. This is what we should want, and then goes on to moderate. Shouldn't that at least be kind of ridiculed? Like, well, I mean, or you could maybe, okay, let's just be objective. He could have gotten into this and going, you know what? Well, I do think we do need some. So I just realized I was wrong. Well, I would respect that, except that's not what's happening. Instead, you keep pretending like you're not doing any of that and cheering on the free speech warrior when that's not the truth. I don't know why that wouldn't matter to anybody. It doesn't mean you have to stop supporting him. You could just laugh it off and keep supporting him, but at least acknowledge it. Recognize that there's a very dishonest game being played right now.
But don't you think free speech is one thing, right? Or not, you know.
Look, if something's illegal, we're going to take it down. If it's not illegal, then we're putting our thumb on the scale and we're being censors.
Okay, so the point, and this is what we all pretended was going to be happening in the first place, that if it's illegal, it goes away. If not, you're good. Well, that's not what's happening. Even that's, again, Yacarino from the World Economic Forum, who is now partnered with GARM, who they pretend they're fighting, claimed right away that we're going to moderate. We have to, and they all went along with it. So it's just hypocrisy. Now, my point is not that this was original and they changed their mind, but he just tweeted this out, going, yeah. So why would you do that if you know that you're also moderating? That seems very deceptive, very manipulative, if you ask me.
You're putting your thumb on the scale for moderating hate speech. I mean, you don't.
Don Lemon is such a moron. He didn't even understand what he was saying. To be clear, what Elon was saying is that if it's illegal, we take it down. But if it's not, then that means we're putting our thumb on the scale. Sounded pretty clear to me, but Don, you know, the old entertainment news guy that got forced into real news, who should be laughed at. But anyway,
put out child pornography. That's not. It's illegal. Some people would say that's considered censorship. I'm just.
And, you know, here another point, by the way, it's funny that this is what happens when you put some kind of fraud pretending to be a journalist to try to make it look like you're holding him accountable, and then it makes him look that good. Let's get if you give someone who has real questions, it might be a little bit more challenging.
Saying you.
No, I literally, Don, you know, I literally said, if something is legal, okay, we will obviously remove it.
Okay.
But if it is not legal, the laws in this country are put forward by the citizens. We're a democracy. If those laws are put in place by the people, we adhere to those laws.
Okay, I agree.
Yeah, but again, that's not what's ultimately happening, even though we just reshared this.
There's the laws of others. If you go beyond the law, you're actually going beyond the will of the people.
Well, it's really flowery words that he has yet to hold up to at all. Now, look, I'm not trying to be overly critical. I just think it's important to highlight this when it's in this weird psychological, I mean, we are witnessing something very unnerving, where an entire grouping of people, and it's not new, cultish kind of things have happened all over throughout history, but where we are like in this dangerous mindset where the reality right in front of us is you're almost being called a child for even highlighting it, because we know that will actually help the bad guy. So the facts don't matter is team sport politics. That's what it means. Now, here is Yacarino debating Yacarino, as Casey Wright pointed out, because this is what she said in the beginning and what she ultimately did, and it all contradicts what he just said.
I was shocked by the evidence uncovered by the House Judiciary Committee that a group of companies organized a systematic illegal boycott against X.
Of an open feedback.
And that's GARM, by the way, that they repartnered with on July 1st. And as far as I can tell, that never went away, despite the dissolving of the umbrella structure, as Mike Benz pointed out. They're still able to continue to function. I guess all the Republicans screaming about how what a win this was didn't want to acknowledge that, which continues to show you that there's something very dishonest happening here.
For the advertising experts in this room to help develop Twitter into a place where they will be excited about investing more money, product development, ad safety, content moderation. That's what the influence is.
Yeah. And if you watch the full clip, there's no pushback. That's yep. Got it. And that's what they've gone on to do.
That puts your global town square, the one place that you can express yourself freely and openly.
We have built content moderation tools that have never existed before.
Okay, so it's clear. Now that was the early one was them spitballing. Now it's her on whatever, what is this? Squawk on the street, whatever. On a mainstream channel, pointing out what they have done. Hope that's clear, because yes, they are moderating.
This company. If you're going to post something that is lawful, but it's awful, you get labeled.
At long-term risk. People are hurt when the marketplace of ideas is constricted.
And we've introduced a new policy called freedom of speech, not reach.
No small group of people should be able to monopolize what gets monetized.
Right. And she's speaking on GARM right there, which they partnered with again. But that's exactly what they're doing over here on a smaller scale. Their little group decides what's monetized. She just said that. What a hypocrite. I mean, it's just insulting.
But more importantly, if you're going to post something that is lawful, but it's awful, you get labeled, you get de-amplified, which means it cannot be shared, and it is certainly demonetized.
No small group of people should be able to monopolize what gets monetized.
It is certainly demonetized.
Let's also make sure we remember that Sam Husseini, I interviewed him in the first time a while ago, but I'm going to mention our interview we just recently had later in the show. We discussed this, and she shows precedent, historically legal precedent, that freedom of reach is a part of freedom of speech. So again, the legal precedent doesn't even matter. They just knew that most people would not know that, and so they just pretend like we still give you freedom of speech, but no, you don't, because that's a part of it, legally speaking. But they don't care, because we're being manipulated by the government. That's the reality. So here is another censorship point that I think is interesting. You might have seen I recently put this thread out, and I'm going to talk about it coming up here. I don't want to try to jump in and find it, but you'll see it in a minute. I've already shared it a lot. It's a thread that I've added, about maybe 12 more videos to today, I think, or maybe 8, I forget, of more doctors speaking out about what they've seen in Gaza. It's horrifying. They're everywhere, and every one of them has the same opinion. And weirdly enough, we can't just deduce, some people can't, what that really means. But I put this thread out, and I got all sorts of comments, some of which said they could see it, but a lot of people were giving me shots that said, look, I can't, all I can see is the link, the thread doesn't show up, or it says the unavailable, which we all have seen. I just bumped up against that yesterday where someone shared a link. I looked at it and said video unavailable, or rather just said post unavailable. But then somebody sent me the direct link, and sure enough, there it was. So there's very weird social engineering kind of stuff going on here. My point is that people weren't able, and actually, let me see if I can't. I want to show you for this point right now. There it is. I'll come back to this. Here is what they put on this video. We put a warning on this post because of my sensitive content. No, everyone here is simply talking. It's people on shows. Everything they list off as a possible sensitive thing is not in this video. And again, it's not speaking about graphic things. That's not what gets this label. They put it on that dramatically suppressed the reach because it was exploding. Rightly so. That's Twitter censoring, as we've talked about many times. So the point is, Casey on that point says, this is another example. He has a post that he put out, and it says, a small taste of Israeli settler colonial barbarism that predates October 7th. And it says, sensitive content. The author labeled this post as containing sensitive content. No, he didn't. He says that's a lie. They most definitely put that label on themselves. And he says, this proves what I was just saying about this. And the point is, that's dramatically reduces what you see. The reach on that goes away, right? And that is the ultimate point, guys. It's about suppressing content. So I think that's important. And he goes through and scrolls and shows you. Oh, and this was interesting, by the way. Now, this might have changed. I put this out earlier, as I do sometimes, saying, setting up the daily wrap-up for today. Now, I know that we're being suppressed. Like, it's very clear. And by the way, we already saw this. I should have grabbed that to include, but I don't want to do it now. Where it got briefly, Grok ended up exposing that they had all these labels on the different accounts. I had more than literally anybody. 60 plus, I think it was 60 or 60. I think it was actually just 60 labels on my account. And of all the people out there, many of them speak who are censored, highlighting that not even close. And they were arbitrary labels that were put on my account to bog it down, to censor it, to put it in the corner. That's what they're doing. That's not even freedom of speech, not reach kind of game. That's just straight up censorship. They do this on purpose, and we all know it if we're being honest with ourselves. My point is, I put this out and I pinned it to the very top. Let's just see, it probably blew up now since I'm going to make the point. But as of right before I went live, it had 1 like on it. Now, for the average person, that might not mean anything, but I think it's really weird for those to see that's not what you would expect on our platform or really anybody's. Let's see if it went up. No, that is really crazy to me. I got to be honest. Now, I'll tell you right now, let's just circle back. If I retweet it, which only does is throw it back in the timeline, I'm willing to bet you it'll start getting engagement. But how is it possible that people who subscribe to this channel, who are constantly, many of them I see nonstop engaging with our thread, wouldn't have seen this pinned to the top? Again, subjective, my personal opinion. But I think you all sense that, especially if you're paying attention to this, that there's a lot of this going on. Just straight up shadow banning, suppression, hiding particular posts, removing videos that just so happen to show crimes being committed in Israel, right? So let's come back to it and see. Now, WikiLeaks put something out. Now, I'm not going to really touch so much just based on time today around the Telegram overlap, but I've actually spoke a lot about that on recent shows. I was on, I don't know, since I haven't been doing the show recently, the last like 3 days, I've been on a lot of radio shows, and I was talking about it because it came up. The one point I want to make sure we don't miss is that I think it's very obvious, despite sort of some portion of the controlled structure wanting to make you think it's somebody outside, and that the like Republican Elon Musk kind of structure is the ones fighting against all of the guys censoring. It's the same thing they're trying to do with all of it. France and UK. It's far more complicated than what they want you to think it is. Because frankly, I don't think they're even remotely on the side of fighting for free speech. But overall, we should care in any sense that somebody like that is being attacked for you allowing you to speak freely. My point is, anything like a BitChute, for example, or Telegram, if it's actually free speech, you're going to find pretty distasteful things. That's what free speech will look like. You'll find the worst type of speech because it's allowed and protected. They're not breaking a law. They're allowed to say what they want, even if it's disgusting. That's what free speech is. So you're going to find those things, but a lot of times they're abused and and people spam it with bad things to make it look worse than it really is because they don't like the free speech zone. They're trying to get that out of your view. But Telegram is an important one to protect. But I also want to point out, don't forget, Israel just got caught for using it to identify where, I'm blanking on his name, the person they recently assassinated in Tehran. They're the ones that boasted about that. So there's clearly an issue there that I'm not talking about censorship, but to consider why some people might want it more controlled. And I think the U.S. State Department, without question, is involved in what's going on there, despite some of the narratives. But I want you to just consider that this is not so much, the way that it's being presented in the two-party illusion, I think, is simply dishonest. And I think he was just recently speaking about this. I think it was on the Tucker interview about how they were trying to coerce him before. And that's not, and the game is always to view that as like Biden's administration. And it's not the reality of how this works. Now, yes, there's obvious differences in administrations, but if you to see it as your government doing this and looking at the track record that left, right ultimately means nothing when you look at the way they've been doing this with every topic. I mean, literally everything. It's just one linear continuation of what they've been trying to accomplish. You'll begin to see that it's just what they would have done no matter who was there, and it's been framed with a different flavor. That's all saying. The point is, we should care. Like I said about anybody, like for Alex Jones, for example, and what happened around Sandy Hook. My opinions around the entire platform, but I would still stand and defend his right to say whatever he wants around these things, because that's what free speech actually is. Now, this is why it relates. WikiLeaks put this out, a Haaretz article. Anti-Israel hackers stole troves of sensitive Israeli data. Now, it's funny how this isn't being included in this conversation right now, and are now publishing gigabytes of secret and classified information, some of which are on these social media platforms. And it says, unable to stop the hacks, Israel is waging a futile war against these leaks. And here's the title of this article is, after Iran steals sensitive Israeli data, Israel tries to censor the internet. My point about all of this is, it's not just that there are people that are trying to make it all about Israel. We have to realize that Israel is making it all about Israel. They are involved in all of these discussions, and the willful ignorance to ignore that, or rather make people like us who are highlighting, because it is the reality that they're involved, somehow hateful against Israel. It is dishonest. The truth is that whether this is connected to Telegram or not, this is the larger conversation, and we can see who the censorship industrial complex is tied back to. And it's not left or right, it's power structures. I think that's important to think about. Oh, and then one other thing I just want to include, I thought this was interesting. I recently pointed out this fake Telegram channel, or excuse me, Rumble channel that was made. It's just The Last American Vagabond 1, 17 followers apparently. And I've already seen them commenting, pretending to be me, because you can't see the one in some cases, or you really just, it's hard to see. Look when this was made. I just find that, I'm telling you, I'm not going to jump to conclusions about whether it's the lawfare that I'm dealing with and the attacks, the lawsuits about things. Everything has exponentially increased by the true definition of the word since October 7th. And I've been talking about Israel for a long time. What's funny is October 8th, this channel was created, and I just think that I've seen a clear increase there. I just thought that was interesting on the note of censorship and so on. Let's see if this already went up. By one, not much more. I find that strange, quite frankly. Usually these get a lot of engagement. Anyway, we'll look back later. Not important, by the way, but let's get into some Israel conversation. So what we're going to talk about right now is in really reasonably quick succession, hopefully. We're going to just show you some of the things currently going on. The reality, despite what you have with your political standing, left, right, seeing through it all, that what Israel is doing is objectively bad. Not just bad, it's objectively terror. It is terrorism. In every stretch, in every definition of the word, no matter how you bend it, that's what they're doing right now. And no matter how you think, how bad, even if every single thing Israel's ever said is true, what they're doing is still genocide. That's not my opinion. That's the reality of international law. So what I want to show you is what is currently happening just over the last so many days to bring that into the unnerving reality that everybody, again, maybe save for Jill Stein, and I say maybe just because I don't trust any of these people, are all blindly not just supporting Zionism or supporting Israel, but openly almost declaring that the war will go on should they be in power. I don't know why that is. I almost thought about framing the show today as something like, I just lost it. What was it? That the point was that they all want the war to go on no matter what. I just lost it anyway. The point is that is alarming to me. That we have a situation where pretty much every single person you can look to is promoting the glorification and continuity of this ongoing genocide, while clearly the majority of the world, and that's not up for debate, is calling this as it is. How does that even possibly make sense without some really unnerving understanding there that this is control or blackmail or something else? It's terrifying to me that some people are either refusing to acknowledge it, don't care, or won't see it, or can't. It really is an unnerving thing because of how clear this all is. Now, Tiberius pointed this out, and we're going to make a quick point about Lebanon and Hezbollah. He says Palestine has a right to defend itself. And this is to say he's making a point. Anybody, everywhere, has a right to defend themselves. That's reality. So does Israel. Everyone has a right to defend themselves in an objective kind of general reality. Lebanon, he says, has a right to defend itself. Yemen has a right to defend itself. Syria, Iran, they have the right to defend themselves. And if anybody's going to make any points about that, you don't just get to say that only one dynamic works, or because we deem you bad guy, it doesn't apply. Israel can bomb the location no matter how you think it's justified or not. And they're not allowed to, in the moment they're going to respond, even though they weren't planning on immediately. The action is, we express restraint because if you did, it would be a terror attack, which is basically the narrative we got. He goes on to say, though, despite all of them having the legal right to defend themselves, this is the one caveat, and it applies to an occupier. And it's not just because we want to say that because of Israel right now. Well before this conversation, that was the static reality. If you're occupying an area, you don't have the right to defend yourself. It's the point of Fort Geneva Convention and the right of armed resistance. Now, I should have finished the sentence. It doesn't mean in any context. But when you're fighting the person that is occupied by you, the legal right to defense goes out the window. And it says under international law, Israel does not, and this has been acknowledged by UN members, by international law experts, lawyers, Israel does not have the right to defend itself from territories it occupies. It's a simple reality. And if you can look it up, it doesn't matter because you want to support one side or the other. If you care about the law, as Israel pretends it's doing, then that should matter to you. So the point in all of that is that Lebanon is one of those groups, and Israel is illegally occupying Lebanon. It's very easy to prove. Same with Syria and the Golan Heights, same with Palestine in general, same with Egypt. We're talking the corridor right now. It's just specifically throughout history. It's not a new thing. The point is that Robert just wrote an excellent article. Hezbollah and Hamas, by the way, I spoke about this on a radio show recently, hit Tel Aviv. Israel says it launched preemptive strikes on Lebanon. How embarrassing, this game they play about preemptive strikes. No, that's called an attack. That's what it's called. But the point here, Hezbollah clearly, and look, you can go back a while and show things that, it's hard to pinpoint the starting point for how long this has been going on, but clearly in an objective way, you can see that this skirmish, it clearly started because of Israel's actions. And then on top of it, whatever you think, they're illegally occupying Lebanon, so same point applies. The point, though, is that they fired all these locations, provably hit civilian targets. Lebanon responded by hitting illegal settlements and military installations, all of which would be considered legal targets because they have given legal official capacity to these illegal settlers. That's Israel's choice to make them a military target. They gave them official capacity. They're armed. They're acting under a level of the military structure. So the point in all of that is to say that they bombed back, and it was a very successful attack. It hit many locations, and Israel's been trying to hide that. Now, that is clearly going to be, exposed either way, I think, because I think it's like Hezbollah is saying, you better acknowledge what happened or we're going to strike again. Now, Robert predicts that Israel, and maybe it's already happening right now, is going to strike again to try to bury all of this in order to try to drive the U.S. to step in, which is the only point. Israel simply is not capable of fighting even Hamas, it seems, without the support of the U.S. and is still losing. So the idea is that they desperately need the U.S. to step in order to make this something other than their destruction. And even then, it seems like that's most likely what's happening here, or the removal of all the power structure, essentially. However you want to look at it, they're failing in what they're doing. And Hamas, which is the second important point, fired from within Gaza. Now, you didn't hear this damn near anywhere. You know why? Because it's important for the narrative to show that they have just deconstructed Hamas, right? What have they been doing for 10 months? If Hamas is able to fire from one of the areas they say they control and hit specifically with higher level weaponry, which shows you not only they've able to conceal not just some flimsy rockets without aim, like some legitimate ability to fight, which Robert has been telling you the whole time they've been holding back, but also that they were able to do this in a way that did get through their system from Hamas inside of Gaza, which they are destroying. I mean, what else do you need to see? What they're doing, guys, is just destroying everything in the area, destroying houses, murdering women and children, raping and torturing. I frankly don't even think it has anything to do with focusing on Hamas other than they're just destroying whatever they come across. We can see that they are... the bottom line, again, I always get pulled into the point. I want to get to the next point, that ultimately it shows you that Lebanon and Hamas and the rest of the people that are pushing back against Israel's genocidal war are not even remotely... what's the word for it? They are not losing, let's put it that way. And I think it's important to understand the dynamic. I'm worried that the U.S. government will get pulled in, or that Israel will take a very, very belligerent, dangerous action that they can't take back, which will force their supporters, who are clearly complicit, to step in either way. And I worry about some kind of a larger attack, whatever that may mean. Now, Robert simply highlighting this on the 25th, Hamas hit a military base in Tel Aviv with M90 rockets. The air defenses failed to intercept the rockets, and one directly struck a target. 11 months of all-out war on Gaza, and Al-Qassam can still hit Tel Aviv with ease. Huge failure for the Israelis. Now, this just happened on the 26th, which was yesterday, an Israeli airstrike against the village of Tir Harfa in southern Lebanon. So what their response is what Robert said, what he predicted, another bombing of a civilian location. That's what they do, you understand. They're hoping, which is clearly not going to work, that if they just keep murdering innocent people, that they might stop doing this. But the reality is they're very aware, which is what Israel projects on everybody else, that they're like this, that the military of Israel, the government of Israel, is belligerently genocidal and are willing to hurt, murder, and torture and rape. That's objectively true today. And so they recognize that if they don't stop them, that it's only going to have more opportunities in the future for this to keep happening. And let's not forget, they're illegally occupied, so this entire thing is illegal from Israel's perspective, no matter how you spin it. Let me know where that went down. It's how perfect. How perfect, right? Somebody in the chat, just let me know the last thing I was saying before it cut out, as I'm going to add these back real quick. I have to add these. Let's see. Yeah, damn it. Apologize for the delay, guys, in the podcast. I'm working with my left hand here, and I just have to reload everything because the entire show just went down. Okay, good. That's still lined up. Where was I? All right. Yeah, okay. So let me know in the chat, guys, what was the last thing I said, just so I know where I can pick up on the point. Let me play a little clip here while I load these back in, so bear with me. At Lebanon. Okay, well, it's generally the same spot I was at. Let's see.
We have to condemn the atrocities that happen every day to Palestinians in the West Bank. You mentioned sexual violence. I was part of the human rights vetting process for arms going to Israel, and a charity called Defense of Children International Palestine drew our attention at the State Department to the sexual assault, actually the rape, of a 13-year-old boy that occurred in an Israeli prison in the Mosque Bia in Jerusalem. We examined these allegations. We believe they were credible. We put them to the government of Israel. And you know what happened the next day? The IDF went into the DCIP offices and removed all their computers and declared them a terrorist entity. I think it is vital that atrocities not happen to anyone, not sexual violations, not any kind of gross violation of human rights. We are looking at a situation where there is so much dehumanification, where people are not seen.
Okay. So we're back. Make sure you guys can hear me. Let me know everything sounds okay. Make sure that's correct again. Okay, good. So I apologize for that, guys. It doesn't surprise me at all, quite frankly. I mean, I think it's pretty interesting with the setup that we have with the 1 gig fiber connection with the, it's just, it doesn't make any sense, but you know, hey, that's the world we live in. Welcome to technocracy. So where I was in general, I mean, I don't know what you missed in regard to the Lebanon point. Overall, I just leave it because I went over most of it. The recording, by the way, is recorded. So that's what's going to go back up on Odyssey if you want to check out what might have been missed right there. But the overall point is, I think the U.S. is they're trying to pull the U.S. in order to save themselves, right? But so here's what Tiberius put out. Israel rapes and massacres entire families, commits more war crimes than the media can keep up with. As I said, the most honest statement of all day. Bombs 7 countries on the same day with Western support. Western politicians, silence. One of Israel's victims, we will retaliate. Western politicians, we urge restraint. This is the absurd clown show that we are seeing. Now, on that note, let's talk about the current daily, like as of yesterday, today, what's going on in Israel and how it's possible that anybody could pretend this is not the most gruesome thing we've ever seen. Sarah Wilkerson. And by the way, it's also something interesting to see how some of these never show images or flesh out the data. I'm telling you that these are small suppression tactics. There it goes. The Israelis kill some 70 Palestinian people in just 24 hours, causing the death toll to surge to 40,334 that we can prove, right? That we can verify, rather, because the amount of people that we know are dead but can't truly verify is a whole other aspect. And the injury toll increased to 93,356. This is on the 25th. Every day this happens. One day. Murdering plenty of people in real time. And the conversation is, I mean, are they even giving you a narrative anymore? Is there even like, oh, well, Hamas was there, or tunnels, or human shields? No, they just don't even care. It's just drifting into the background, especially since the election is starting to take everyone's attention. Oh, and that's what I was going to say earlier, actually. You could have framed this as, you know, Israel's genocide is the most important topic how I was going to frame it. Like in regard to the election coming up, it's amazing how there are a lot of people, and I get it, we're talking about U.S., what's going on in our lives immediately. But even then, how is it possible that we can't see how what's going on there directly affects us? In so many ways, it makes my head spin. The idea of, like, again, generally speaking, that the Israeli genocide, and really more so your government, either side support for it, should be the primary point in this 2024 election. And frankly, I kind of think that it is, no matter what they end up saying. That seems to be the central point they don't want us talking about, yet seems to be on everyone's minds around it all. And this is why. It's not just because it is a genocide of an entire civilization that we should care about because we're human beings with compassion, but it also should matter that your governments are literally the lifeblood of why this is happening. Your tax dollars are being used to do this. How is that not an American issue? But of course, because people who are invested in the status quo and the two-party illusion want you to think we're children, naive for pretending this matters. Why don't you just pick the other evil? Come on, Ryan, grow up. I mean, it's almost hard. I can't even say that without laughing. It's unreal that there are people presenting that as somehow the balanced adult view in the room. Especially with all that we know, all the different examples of being cheated and lying and voting machine manipulation and just flat out illusion of any kind of voting process. I mean, it's unreal to me. Anyway, Mohammed Safa points out that Israel has dropped almost 80,000 tons of explosives. This means that Israel has dropped, now get this, 36 kilograms of explosives on Gaza for every single man, woman, and child. Think about that. And for the show, not on the podcast, take a look at what it actually looks like. 36 kilograms of explosives for every single person that exists in this area. I mean, guys, that is just unreal. Yunus Sharawi has a great thread here, which I hope you'll take the time to read through. He says, what happened yesterday in Palestine? Yesterday. Now, this is the 25th he's talking about. Israeli military bombs in Gaza, kills dozens, including women and children, executes a 15-year-old with a sniper, which happens constantly, in Mawasi, in the safe zone. Unleash settlers in a mass attack in a Bethlehem village, killing one, and strikes in Tulkarem, killing 5 people. North Gaza, 3 Palestinians were bombed while on Hoja Street in Jabalia refugee camp. The target was a food stall. 2 passerbys and the owner of the stall were killed. No tunnel to be seen, no human shield, just, food. Can't have that. 7 people were killed in Gaza City by Israel fire while fishing. I even had that coming up. I'll show you. I mean, it's like the whole thing. Same neighborhood over here. You got 3 people killed. The attack was on the family that left 3 killed, 2 killed in an apartment building. Israel military targets a house in West Gaza near a patient's friend medical center, striking an Aliji residence and killing 5 civilians. Among them were a father and 4 children, 3 of whom were his own, all sheltering in the house. You're not going to hear this on CNN and Fox News, despite their pandering to pretend that they care about all this stuff. Clearly, this is genocide. And it's not because Yunus Sharawi says so. It's because you can prove this stuff. It's obvious. It's documented. And even the ICC and ICJ are using what he's highlighting because he's proving it with receipts, tying it back to their Twitter accounts where they boast about it, or their Telegram, or their Instagram, or their TikTok, sharing it, laughing about it, high-fiving about it. I'll show you an example next. Sarah Wilkinson shows this from the 26th, yesterday. Israel bombs a crowded street market, and guess what? Jabalia refugee camp. They just nonstop. Isn't this supposed to be somewhere they've already cleared, that they've controlled? They bombed relentlessly already. They let them come back and rebuild, and they bomb them again. North of Gaza, murdering at least 3 Palestinian civilians and causing panic. You can look for yourself. There's no indication of tunnels or human shields. They've already done what they were doing in this area. They're not even trying to explain it. They're just torturing these people. Vanessa Beeley, speaking of that torture, shows you some horrifying images. This is what U.S. bombs do to Palestinian bodies on an hourly basis. We talked about recently the butterfly bullets or the expanding bullets they use on the regular, which we can verify. In some cases, they boast about internationally illegal munitions. And we're not even talking about chemical weapons and like white phosphorus or biological manipulations they use with the gas they use. Nope. We're talking about weapons that are documented to be illegal because they maximize suffering, usually don't even kill in most cases because they blow off your arm, unless I guess you're shot in the chest and so on. But the idea being that they're meant to maim. I mean, I even take it back because at the end of the day, any bullet or sets would kill, I think, in the same way. But the point is they're meant to maximize immediate suffering. That's how they're designed. Israel primarily uses that. That's the bombs they use, the way they deploy them. Guys, this has been documented by human rights groups for decades. If you're only just hearing about this, ask yourself why. These images should haunt every citizen of every country complicit in genocide. Ask yourselves, is genocide being normalized? And if the answer is yes, ask yourself why. 15-year-old Dia al-Adani from Deir al-Balah, Gaza, dreamed of being a photographer, injured in an Israeli strike that severed both of his arms. He still hopes to pursue his passion with prosthetic arms. Daya is one of the tens of thousands of Palestinian children who lost their limbs to Zionist airstrikes during the ongoing genocide in Gaza and all occupied territories. It's sad. Here's the fishermen we were talking about. 7 Palestinian fishermen were killed. This was on the 26th. In an Israeli drone strike off the coast of Gaza, the fishermen were attempting to get some fish for their families. Israel continues to blockade the strip. Right, so we're being told that we're not restricting food. We're just stopping if we're going to Hamas. But here are fishermen trying to feed their families, and you shoot them. Why? Because they're trying to get food. You do your best to try to reconcile those two things, and you tell me they're not trying to stop them from eating. It's the same it's always been. I don't need to convince you guys. It's embarrassing that anybody out there, the ridiculous clowns like Ben Shapiro of the world that are belligerently, like almost enjoying how they know they're lying about how obvious this is. Anyone trying to pretend that this is the most moral army in the world, you should never forget that they are not what they seem. This is not a one-issue thing, guys. This is a principle thing. This is about who they truly are. If you can pretend that this many things are obviously the opposite of what they are. Vanessa Beeley. And I just made this point about the tents. Multiple forced displacements by genocidal Zionist forces have resulted in Palestinian tent cities on beaches west of Khan Yunis in Gaza. They pushed them from the safe areas into basically the water. Tanks right behind them, boats actually firing on them from the water. There's multiple videos of this. Helicopters, quadcopters, jets all above them, firing when they see fit. Death in every direction. No escape. Sweltering heat, no food, no clean water, no sanitation, no dignity, no safety. Welcome to the Gaza genocide. This is absolute torture. Then the point is, this is the image I just showed the other day, as I made the point the same, Palestinian families are literally being pushed into the sea. Remember when they kept telling you that? All the leaders of Israel were saying, push them into the sea, drive them into the ocean. Well, there you go. Because the limit of the safe area is now down to just 35 square kilometers for millions of people with no water, no food. It is the worst. One of the worst parts of this is the pretend that this is not as bad as it is. The idea that this is it's not just genocide, it's torture. Like they are laughing about what they're doing to these people, getting joy out of watching them suffer because they're telling you that. They're high-fiving about it. The point here is that then they bomb these tents. That's what this is. Lots of videos going around, and this is on the 21st. So-called safe zone and largest displacement persons camp in southern Gaza. There was an advance by the occupation forces in the eastern region. At the same time, gunfire was fired from warships in the ocean. So you drive them to the shore, then you bomb the shore, fire at them from the ocean, watch them flee in every direction without anywhere to go because there is nowhere else to go, and we don't call that what it is? I mean, why? If you wanted to you could just murder all of them. You're clearly getting away with it. This is to watch them suffer. They are clearly doing this for a reason, and it could just be to kind of minimize the visual reality of absolute murder. But at the same time, again, like I keep saying, oh, well, I thought I had it right there. Here. They're high-fiving about it, guys. I mean, this is everywhere. It's one example, but realize, as I said, only monsters and the willfully ignorant are still standing by the Zionist Israeli rulership. This is a video that's been going around. You know why? Because it's been posted by an IDF member, as Giannis Tarawi and plenty of others have called out. An Israeli occupation soldier uploaded footage of himself dapping, handshaking another soldier in celebration right beside the body of a Palestinian civilian that they just killed. I mean, I don't even have the words for how so psychopathic that is. You can't even argue that these people have been so dehumanized that they just can't recognize it. Human beings, I don't think, at some level, this is who you are. if you're able to do something personally, in my opinion. That's my point. They're posting this on social media, and we're not supposed to pretend. I mean, we're supposed to ignore that this is an obvious action, deliberate torture. And here's another example. Remember the World Central Kitchen conversation, as they pretended, despite the fact they bombed, I think it was 2 or 3 cars in a row. Like they bombed the car, they got out another car, bombed the next car, all of them visually marked. They said, oopsie, we didn't mean to murder those the aid workers. And the U.S. government pandered to the lie about the whole thing. According to Matt Miller, they're still investigating it. We'll get back to you. We'll follow up with the issue. We'll raise the issue, right? But guess what? On August 24th, injuries have been reported among the staff of the World Central Kitchen. You know why? They bombed their headquarters. Oops. As I said, so much for the accident narrative, huh? As they're targeting World Central Kitchen. 3, 2, 1, Hamas. They're working for Hamas. Just wait. It's probably already being said. I guarantee it's being floated by all the sycophants online or the bots they're using to justify why it somehow makes sense to pretend that you accidentally targeted them to then bomb their headquarters. It's just so transparent. Daniela Modas points out a story that's been going around that it's obvious. That it's like the countless examples of them pretending to give water to an old woman and you find out they shot her afterward. There's been so many examples like that. It makes me pain for the reality of, I mean, I always know that there are bad people in the world, but this whole experience has shown me that there is real evil in this world. And I've known that to a degree, but like, you just wonder, I mean, this is transparent. I mean, they're showing you who they are. In this case, a Palestinian woman, pregnant woman, and a man, his wife, rather the pregnant woman is his wife and the man with her, they were hanged to death by Israel, thrown on a rooftop to demonstrate to the rest of people what they're going to do. I mean, it's, again, these are everywhere. Everywhere. Matt Kennard, he says it's so bad that even CNN are reporting it. And my point, that's opportunism. They recognize that they're going to lose everything if they stick out the genocide. So they're going to give you some truth. Still trying to pander to Israel when they can. Here's what they say. This is on the 23rd of August. It's the truth. Children are drinking from puddles and wading through sewage pools as Israel pummels water systems in Gaza. Yeah, I guess the old narrative is out of the way, right? Oh, it's all Hamas. No, it's not. Not even remotely. Now, again, I'm only going to play one of these. I just want to make a point about one they said, but I want to make sure you check this out because this blew up within minutes and then immediately got labeled, and then it's barely grown since. That's how this works. These are videos that are shocking. Any one of these alone should blow your mind. And I'm not saying you blindly have to trust every doctor. The point is that it's you can see what's going on there, and then you can see these doctors coming back and telling you what they're seeing, and there are an endless amount of them. I just added multiple more. I think it was 8 more today. More doctors, more day by day, coming home and saying genocide. I mean, they're shooting children in the head. I'm watching the children get attacked. They're torturing, they're raping, they're stealing. Everything you're hearing, they're explicitly telling you is happening. Make sure you share these. There's a reason they didn't want this going around, because most people, this will convince them, because it should, because it's real. It's what's happening. Now, one of the videos I want to play is from this guy talking about organ trafficking, organ harvesting, because that's happening. It's obvious.
Bodies taken.
Oops.
Captured, and when they've returned to them, they've had organ harvesting. So they've seen the evidence. It happens. Israel itself has said, for example, that they have the largest skin bank throughout the world, and that much of that skin is taken and harvested from the bodies of their prisoners, of their victims. So
True.
What we see is we live in a world in which everything is commodified.
It's true. I mean, we've talked about this many times. And all the different overlaps to like that's what he's talking about is like the public part of it, where they act like there's some legal there is a darker side of this where we've proven this in networks in the world, which I'll play for you next, taking advantage of war zones. We've talked about a lot. Now, it's not just organ trafficking. And I'm not going to say in this moment we can highlight this explicitly to Israel. I do know there's an overlap. My point is that we also see in a general sense in war zones, human trafficking. Syria made a big point about this, about all the missing children. So my point is to recognize that people like this, entities that are willing to use war zones like Ukraine to harvest organs from people that are in some cases alive because they're so desperate. I mean, like willing to do so. We saw Rudy Giuliani boast about this in regard to Iran. Remember the clip where he goes, this is what makes a good regime change, that their sanctions have driven them to sell their organs. He literally said that. I don't think he knew that would get out. So the point is the same. That they're taking advantage of situations to take organs. And what else do you think they're capable of? But there's a doctor telling you, as of the many different examples we've seen, and this is one of the articles, that they're doing this. We saw this one, Al-Shifa. These are, again, the point is these are doctors from other parts of the world who are there and saw it happen. Israel's open secret of Palestinian organ theft happens all the time. Now, we've also talked about the human shields open. I mean, everything seems to be an open secret about what Zionism really is and what they're doing. But here is a video Expat Vice put out. Now, it's a clip that was put out regarding the Ukraine war and forward, telling you that, at least by that report, they were taking organs from people in Ukraine.
In Israel, who'd ordered them in advance. On Friday, Ukrainian authorities arrested a dozen people, most of them Israelis, for taking part in the scheme. The network, which mostly sought kidneys, paid as much as $10,000 per body part. The organs were then sold for over $200,000. Ukraine's Interior Ministry says most of the organ donors were impoverished young women. This is not the first time that reports have surfaced implicating Israelis in organ trafficking. Last year, a Swedish journalist published an article claiming that Israeli soldiers killed young Palestinians for their organs.
Well, isn't that interesting? Now, obviously, people that want to dismiss that because they say, oh, press TV, it's going to be, it's what's hilarious about things like that. It's kind of the topic we were just talking about at the beginning. That the information is what should matter. And I'm just using this to make a point because the obvious reality, if you care to look, is unbelievably obvious. I covered it in the show. The information is everywhere. There's been so many examples of both just generally Israelis getting caught in trafficking organizations, organ and people, but then specifically intelligence agencies, Mossad, the elements of that, or just specifically even people that are tied to the Israeli government. I mean, realize Epstein himself was tied, according to Acosta, to Mossad and CIA. There's a clear overlap to all of this. The point in showing you this is just to see how dark this really is, what they're actually doing. Now, please make sure you share this doctor thread. I think it's important to get this out because it will reach people. Now, as I said, as they sit here and high five and do a little handshake around the dead person, only monsters and the willfully ignorant are actually standing by the Zionist government. Now, as BM points out, for those that are saying, oh, he was a terrorist, right? He was a Hamas member, assuming you actually could know that somehow. The point is that we've shown without a question that they see every Palestinian as a terrorist. Now, I'm not going to say that literally every Israeli, but we have to see that it's explicitly made clear that the Israeli government and the military, the IDF, are openly telling you this. They say this on. The only ones I've seen saying the opposite are the ones that end up whistleblowing. Now, that doesn't mean I'm sure that this exists somewhere, but realize that this is a very clear majority. And this is an example of that. As he says, and remember, BM as he says, an anti-Zionist Hebrew from Israel who's calling this stuff out. He says, this is what Mr. Badza, how do you say that? Badza, who is a resident of Bakal al-Ghurbai, sees every day when he goes in and out of his workplace parking lot, which is located in a Jewish town. Right? So we're talking about a location in Israel where he is a Palestinian and he is working and coming. So he has the allowance to be there, or most likely has Israeli citizenship, which I think most of them do that actually are able to be there. I forget. Anyway, the point is he's Palestinian and he's allowed to be there because he's coming and going and working in these locations. Right? So that means that he's not a Hamas member. He is a guy who's literally working in their homes or doing the grunt work, which is usually how they utilize people in these areas. And every time he comes and goes from this Jewish town, it literally says on the screen, Bon voyage, Abu Saeed the terrorist. Or when he gets there, welcome, Abu Saeed the terrorist. Yeah, but come on, clean my house now. Come on in and do your work in this area, terrorist. You know why? Because it's just a derogatory term because they think all Palestinians are terrorists. So when you go back and realize that they're murdering all the terrorists, they say they're murdering all the Palestinians. It says many Palestinian citizens of Israel working in Jewish towns have been facing threats, discrimination, harassment since October 7th. And it's far worse than that, guys. Here's even Human Rights Watch, who just made a massive report on the 26th about what we've all been seeing. Everyone trying to downplay the Sid Tiemann rape scandal. And really what we now realize, and this is a central part in that realization, that it is not one location or one bad apple. It is a systematic forced rape, or rather just rape situation. They are deliberately raping these people. Let's not forget, we saw the guy on Israeli media, one of the leading shows, proudly, aggressively arguing that we need to make this systematic. That way, they'll know if you do an October 7th, we're going to rape you. If you do anything wrong, this is what's going to happen to you. He was arguing. He was pushing back. Some of the people came in and said, that's not what he really means. And he goes, yes, I do. We should be raping them. Very clear. We saw people like Gavir and Smotrich say they should be allowed to. We saw them have riots saying that they should be allowed to rape them if they're not Jewish. This is what actually happened. Human Rights Watch covers it all. On top of that they prove that it was not just this one example. As the title says, Israel, Palestinian healthcare workers, not Hamas, random Palestinians tortured. And guys, it is the worst thing you can imagine. I mean, it really is something that I don't even want to go, the disgusting nature of what they're doing, it'll sit with me forever. Here's one example, and read it if you want to understand what's going on. And you guys know, based on what I said, what the show is about, but read it in your own time if you want to truly understand the depth of evil we're talking about. Here's one example from Rami Abdul from the human rights group, Euromed Human Rights Work, Euromed, what was it again? I'm getting all confused in my head. Euromed Human Rights Monitor, excuse me. Quote, 3 soldiers took turns raping him with an M16 rifle. No one else knew, but he told me as a paramedic. He was terrified. His mental health was awful. He started talking to himself. They are breaking these people down. This is the Guantanamo Bay stuff, guys. This is where it came. This is the overlap. There are so many examples like this. It's just, again, it's that dreadful reality that this is in the world. These people exist. Now, Rami Arya points out, chilling United Nations Security Council briefing from Save Our Children's operations lead in the emergency health unit in Gaza. Another doctor. It says, am told it's the first briefing the Security Council has received via video from the Strip since the war began. Posted on the 22nd. It says speech focus was on polio, but this quote stands out as well. Quote, our protection teams in Gaza are working with children released from the Israeli military detention system. Children. These children report sexual violence, including rape. They report being denied food, beaten, attacked by dogs. Everything we're hearing. Don't forget, one of the worst parts of this, a human rights Euromed Monitor proved they were using dogs who were trained to rape people. That is the peak. That is so psychopathic. Terrifying. It says they report being denied food, attacked by dogs. They report seeing their parents stripped and beaten in front of them. That's psychological torture, guys, on top of real torture. These children are struggling to cope with the profound trauma and mental, physical harm that this has caused. They're trying to destroy these people for the future. As you keep hearing them say, well, they're going to grow up to be terrorists, we should kill them now. That's their logic. They being the psychopathic Zionist maniacs we're discussing, anyone that doesn't feel that way wouldn't be in that category. Now, BM also points out the settler aspect of this. If this person asked, Sid Tiemann, the rape prison we're talking about, rape in the name of God, it says they are proud of it. They are proud of their judo Nazi barbarism, he calls it. These people can't be reasoned with. The state of Israel can't be reasoned with. These settlers, again, the point is, as Bet Selam highlights. Look at that. I'm telling you guys, this is my point. Oh, are we really going to pretend like they just can't translate that one? Oops. Good thing I've got the translator on here. Here's what it says. It's just so transparent to me how obvious they're censoring. It says, the settler Shem Loksky sexually harasses a Palestinian and implicitly threatens him with rape. See? I wonder why Twitter doesn't want to translate that for you. The point is, you can watch them. They're not only saying we should be able to rape, they're saying it's good, as it says before, in the name of God. What kind of God are we talking about here? What kind of religion are we talking about here when you're rationalizing that you're allowed to rape people? I mean, guys, this is a problem. And again, if you speak to Jews of the world, they'll tell you that's not what they believe, because it's not. And there's plenty of weird things in any religion you'll find that people, the point is, whether it's Christians or Muslims, the reality is are rooted in the idea of morals and kindness and compassion. And yes, you'll find things in the Bible or any of them that are explicit and crazy. But we all go, yeah, but it's not who we are today, or whatever. So the idea that we're pretending that this is Judaism, it's not, it's Zionism that are bastardizing this. These people have lost themselves to this cultish mentality. And there's things like this in Christianity, there's things like this in any religion. You'll find people, I mean, let's not forget, people in the KKK murdered people in the name of Christendom. That's what it doesn't mean that's what Christians believe. There's a problem here, and we shouldn't associate it with anything other than what they are and what they're doing. Now, this is just a side note that we're seeing this, and you're not going to hear this on the corporate media. Ask yourself why. This is today it's being reported. If every hint at some kind of a hate crime towards somebody who might even be Jewish adjacent or, whatever, somehow is the biggest story in all of Webster media. A Palestinian man found dead in Belgium with his hands and feet tied to a tree. All these are fake claims of lynching. And here we go. Weird how nobody wants to talk about that. Clearly, I think this is being normalized around the world. Here's the report if you want to watch it. It's in another language, but what the media hides, give you the media report from Belgium. Mohammed Shihada points out, despite all of this, your government in the United States, if you're in the United States, just proudly sent the 500th plane full of bombs to keep the genocide going. Israel receives the 500th U.S. airlift in 325 days. Let that sink in. Right? It at least one a day, if not more a day. Delivering ammunition, armaments, armored vehicles, protective equipment, and more for the IDF to continue its war of extermination. You think they could continue this war without everything they need that's coming from another country? It says, remember when Biden said in May he'd stop sending bombs to Israel if it launched a Rafah invasion? Yeah, how'd that work out? Now, for everyone that wants to jump on this and say, see, that's why Biden is bad. Well, yes, I agree. He is bad. He's a war criminal. All of them are. But if you think for 1 second this is what the left would do and the right's any different, this is the point from the beginning. We need to recognize that every single one of them are supporting this, the continuation of this. Even going as far as Tulsi Gabbard at this point in RFK, seeing as how they just leaned in with the group who made it clear this was going to continue. There's no denying this, guys. Here is Trump's campaign video that just went out. Drink this in.
Before thousands were brutally killed, including Americans. Before Iran helped Hamas plan the attack, killing Americans.
There is no evidence whatsoever that took place, that Iran helped them plan whatever. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. I'm saying that that's just a claim that's been floated, so he's using it politically. Gotta love the honesty there, right?
Biden gave billions of taxpayers' money to Iran.
Nope, that was Iran's money that the U.S. seized, and it's a very easy thing to prove. But even if you don't agree with that, then say that. But you don't need to lie about what the reality is. If you just don't want them to have the money that they could have used for terrorism, if you think that way, then say that. We stole their money because they would use it for terrorism. The game of playing that Biden gave them all this money, it's embarrassing, and people are being willfully ignorant or truly trying to deceive others. And this is the point we're making. You should care about whether these are true or not, even if you still want to support him. That's the point we're making about principles here.
Trump played hardball with Iran. Destroyed ISIS.
Oh, he did he? The ISIS that just attacked Iran. Isn't that funny how it works? ISIS multiple times just attacked Iran, declared Iran as a key. Like, think about how ridiculous this all is. Hamas overlap. They claim that they think they're, I mean, the idea is clearly that ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which we can prove is a proxy element of the West, guys. It's not up for debate. If we're not grown up enough to talk about adults in the room to acknowledge that, which means left and right of your government are supporting these things, then you're not the adult in the room, because these receipts are obvious. Whether it's Ben Swann's great documentary, whether it's James Corbett's 3-part documentary, it's undeniable. Whether the proof of them shuttling them around using all sorts of transports to move them from country to country, moving their families around. Netanyahu giving them medical treatment in Syria, but yeah, let's ignore it. Or how about the fact that we see ISIS patches on the Azov movement that they're funding in Ukraine? But yeah, we're all just a bunch of children. We don't get it, right?
Kept the Middle East at peace.
Oh, did he? My God.
Kept us out of endless wars.
No, he continued all of them. He even just boasted about that. He just didn't, I didn't start any new, which is a lie, but we ended them. No, you didn't. They're all still going. Afghanistan wasn't ended by you, and it's not even ended. The point is that's all a big fabrication. His followers love saying that, but let's realize both with Iran, as well as, what was the other example was, God, the point was Iran was important. He assassinated Soleimani. That could have easily, Venezuela was one of the others. There's a third one I can't remember right now. They could have spun out into a massive war if Iran decided to respond. Just because it didn't doesn't mean he didn't start. That would have been an example. Or the obvious coup attempt multiple times in Venezuela. Why? I mean, in and of itself, that should be considered a war field. The point is, Sudan wasn't talked about. They bombed all over Sudan. That wasn't a new. The point is, all of these examples are lies. I mean, in the sense of what they're putting forward. Like, they're putting forward narratives about Iran, about that are easily proven to be false. Hey, but it makes fun talking points, doesn't it? Let's all lean into that.
Through strength.
History shows very plainly that
Wars. Through strength. History kept us out of endless wars.
Kept us out of endless wars through strength. I mean, this game they play where like acting militarily as your peace movement, it's Orwellian. It's preemptive strikes. It's whatever they want to pretend is them doing the good thing, while in fact what they're doing is what they would call terrorism if anybody else did it. Good times.
Through strength.
history shows very plainly that evil only respects one thing: unyielding strength. When I'm back in the White House, our enemies will know if you...
How's that worked out so far? He had 4 years to show his unyielding strength. What happened? Well, what about the war on terror? Isn't that just nothing but belligerent military action? Okay, so if the argument is that strength and what they've done this whole time is supposed to be the one thing they respect, why didn't that change anything? In fact, as we understand it, terrorism's more prominent than ever. Now, that in and of itself could be a narrative. The point is that the claim that the terrorism present in the Middle East is more than it ever was before the war on terror began. Which, I mean, they could argue it's a miscalculation and blowback, and you killed them and their children become terror. Whatever you want to explain, it doesn't matter. The point is, if that's your narrative, what are you basing that on? Like the idea that somehow that because you're going to bomb things that they're just not going to do what they're going to do, that's a very naive reality when you understand that most of the people they're calling terrorists are the ones that are fighting against tyranny and oppression. I'm not saying that there aren't terrorists. I'm not even talking about ISIS or any of that. I'm talking about the ones they always focus on, not their own people that they fund, but the reality of things like Ansar Allah movement or the Hezbollah, or any number of popular groups that have been chosen by their peoples that aren't clean. They have their clear problems, but the idea of pretending that you need to, just bomb and murder and attack and invade, and that's going to stop, you're driving that reality. Those people are going to fight back because their whole world, it's the idea of pretending like if China just took Florida or whatever, we would just go, well, we're going to leave it be because we don't want to no, you're going to fight back because they took something from you. And then the point is, if you're going to fight back, if they just started shooting at you, are you going to go, whoa, okay, never mind, you're pretty strong? Well, no, because you're fighting for what's yours. And this is an inherent concept in what we believe we are as Americans, and we're supposed to pretend that nobody else has that value. They're not going to stand up and fight for what they believe in. I mean, this is the naive reality that only thing they're doing is fighting terrorism. And that is genuinely what they're all talking about. Even Tulsi Gabbard. How are you leaning in? Your entire premise was on stopping the endless wars, and all you lean in with somebody who is championing the Israel genocide? Because the narrative is you don't like wars? Is that all we want? Is just a statement? If you're saying you're going to continue, which this is showing you, the fight in the ongoing genocide in Gaza, you're not anti-war. Not RFK, not Tulsi Gabbard, and these are principles. If you want to go, well, he's better than Kamala, get out of the room because you're not principled. You're pretending and you're buying into your fake selection, or rather your fake choice. I, or anybody else that can see through it, is wanting, I don't want you to present us with two false choices. I want the real country to pick the real leader. But that's not what we're getting. So to pretend like the adults in the room are the ones that lean into the fact that you're being played, my God, that's naive.
Spill a drop of American blood, we will spill a gallon of yours.
Yeah, now, is that what we want? Right, okay, what happens if we're talking about somebody, like what happens if an ally does by accident? Like, or there's so many ways to pretend that that's just bluster, but at the end of the day, isn't that exactly what they claim like the Soviet Union was? This idea that you just belligerently act with violence all the time? The old saying that if you're a hammer, if what is it? They'd have hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? I mean, if you only come at this with that mindset, well, that's what you're going to get. And guess what? That's booning, that's business for the merchants of death, which, by the way, this government runs in the blood of other countries. Much as they want to pretend otherwise, that's how you keep it going, as Thomas Massey just pointed out. If we take money away from one field of war, it has to go somewhere else. The whole thing will collapse. So if you think for 1 second that these are going to stop, you're blinded to the idea that Trump is different. He has nothing to back that up. His history over 4 years has shown the exact opposite. And I know the narrative doesn't support that, but that's not the truth. Look at what actually happened. Look at what he's actually done.
President Trump, the strength we need to make America strong again.
I'm Donald J. Trump.
And the point is that this is not about everyone's screwed and there's no good choice. The point is that these are not all the choices. I mean, it's just simple as that. And pointing out that he is not what he pretends to be is just being honest. And if you don't like the honesty of that, look, and even if you disagree with my opinion, are you suggesting that I don't want to get too mired in the hypothetical. The bottom line is that I think everybody understands. I mean, with Operation Warp Speed or any of these things, that there's a very clear problem here. That this guy represents almost all of the problems that we've seen, other than what they say around what actually happened. There are people out there now saying, "Don't stop telling me about Operation Warp Speed." Same kind of thing. Be an adult. Stop. What's the statement that the perfection is the enemy of good? It's like, are we really pretending like we shouldn't, like I said before, striving for what's better and that we're supposed to settle for war criminals because he's less of a war criminal over here? I either think, people that are pushing this are either are very, very naive or are manipulating you. Now, here is a couple of points about what's going on in Israel that I wanted to make sure you saw. Right now, they're going, hooray, look at this. We can prove Israel's not racist. It's not an apartheid state because, look, they just rescued a Muslim guy. Which I guess it's just almost kind of laughably stupid to try to make that argument right now. Here's Ben Shapiro being laughably stupid as usual. He says, remember, Israel's supposedly a racist apartheid state. No, it is, verifiably so, based on the law, based on static reality, whether or not they rescued a Muslim guy. But, journalism, Ben, it says, in which the IDF troops just went to Gaza terror tunnels to rescue a Bedouin Muslim. Again, let's assume that's even actually what happened. We'll get there. Now, I said, see, look, a Muslim guy. Now we can go back to starving, torturing, and raping Palestinians? I said, you're one dense Zionist, Ben. You've got to be the dumbest smart person on Twitter if you thought this would swing your way. You are very transparent. And then it turns out there was something to be added to this that isn't the full picture that they're presenting, or what they're presenting is not the full picture, as Muhammad Shihada points out. And I just said, and now we know you're also a liar or very naive. They found him by accident. And this is not the first time. Israel, an Arab captive, the Israeli Arab captive, Israel is now desperately taking credit for, saying, look, we're not racist, which Ben dutifully just regurgitated what they said. The report turns out that they escaped their captors on their own, which again, you're going to see this filter through as they say this when they're interviewed. They were found by chance. Just like before, guys, this is not new. We talked about, except this time they shot them instead. This is the BBC from December 18th. Where 3 hostages were out. They got away. They were out there. They're speaking Hebrew. They are saying, I'm Israeli. I'm a hostage. And most of them, you could argue, don't look very clearly like they are not a Palestinian. And immediately shot 2 of them. One of them ran away. All this is documented in this article. 15 minutes went by. He's over there going, I'm Israeli. Don't shoot me. This is not up for debate. He then gets coaxed out. They say, come on out, come on out. He walks out and 2 of these IDF members shoot him. Again, I say this every time. There is simply no misunderstanding that. Whatever, I can't speak to why. They knew he was Israeli. They shot him. And remember, they came out with it. They had a towel or a blanket with written SOS. I mean, guys, this is deliberate. They were murdering. It's Hannibal directive, I think, in my opinion. Either way, it shows you there's a very clear directive that they don't want people coming home and telling you that, no, that what they keep telling you is not true. We were more afraid of your bombings, like even Noah Argamani's been making clear. No, I'm struggling because of what you did and the bombs you sent. They just recently got caught lying about her. So the point is that this guy got found and the Israeli government does what it does. They go, perfect. Let's lie about this. Let's use this to make it seem like we're not what we know we are, which means they clearly recognize that they know what they're doing. And the Israeli military jumps up and goes, hey, we rescued a hostage. And they literally said in a complex operation. Like, so this is my point as always. They can't just come out and say we rescued the guy. Make it simple. Knowing it's a lie, but we rescued him. You could that alone would be interpreted as you did something, right? And then at the very least, you could walk away going, oh, we didn't say we found him if he got pushed, but we rescued him. See, my point is you could have been very tactful about it, insinuated that you did do something, but we rescued him. Let the media run with it like they would have, but no, what Israel does. We're not only not starving them, they're drowning them in food. You see my point? Instead of just going, no, we're giving them more than we're giving them enough. They come out and say, no, it's a complex operation. It took us 45 months to plan it. Whatever nonsense they spit out. And then they look really stupid when it very quickly comes out that it wasn't at all. You see my point? Like, they're just bad at this. Every time it's reactive and every time it's way over the top. I just don't know why, but it's almost hilarious. And they found the guy, and now they want you to think they're not racist for finding the guy. Here's even Benjamin Netanyahu coming out and going, and this Prime Minister of Israel's Twitter account, I commend the IDF and the ISA for another successful rescue operation. We're working relentlessly to return. No, you're not. Even your own people are hounding you because you're not doing that. They're all accusing you of deliberately circumventing the deal and keeping them there, killing them. Guys, this is not up for debate. It's on the Israeli media. But here he is aiming this right at you for very clear reasons. They are desperate. And here's even a U.S. congressman. Here's what it says. He says, for 10 grueling months, Israel has risked the lives of its soldiers to rescue all the hostages held captive by Hamas. That's what this guy is saying. I mean, you could almost feel the Zionist strings on this guy. I mean, think about how crazy that is. 10 months of an ongoing genocide that the world is calling out. This guy stands up and goes, congratulations on their grueling, risking their lives effort to save the guy that they just found accidentally. It says their bravery secured the rescue of this guy. No, it didn't. And it says after here, a rare moment of joy made possible by Israel's indiscriminate zeal for justice. And a stark reminder that more work remains. Bring them home now. Yeah, that has turned into a chant at the Israeli government. Bring them home now is saying stop effing around and take any deal they offer. You think I'm lying? Look it up. Look at what the Israeli people are saying by and large. Here's an American congressman being funded by AIPAC. That's the reality. Telling you the opposite of even what Israelis are saying. Because the whole propaganda game is aimed at you, America. That's what it is. This disgusting human being, or so blindly naive he doesn't even know that he's lying, is actually pretending that they rescued the guy they found, and that all of this is because of their indiscriminate zeal for justice, as they're literally being accused by every international entity as being a genocidal maniac who's raping and torturing people. I mean, how do we make sense of this, other than to recognize how lost this government is in this dynamic? And on that point, as Lala points out, I-24 being the channel that brought you 40 beheaded babies, remember that? They put this out. Sinwar reportedly hiding in plain sight, dressed as a woman. More of those, every accusation is an admission. Like, we just saw them dress up as Palestinians and women, and more than once, mind you, and then break into hospitals and murder people on their beds. That's a crime no matter who you think they're going after. Nobody cared. The point is, I guarantee you this is about trying to make it look like when they murder women, no, they're just probably Hamas members, or that's why we thought. It's just disgusting what they're doing. And Rami says the same thing. Is this an attempt to justify the thousands of women Israel are killing in Gaza? And this point as well. This is what we're talking about. This is one of the most transparently dishonest. I mean, it's Arnaud Bertrand made a great thread about this. Here's what the American Jewish Committee says. This morning in southern France, the Yaakov Synagogue was the target of a vile terrorist attack. Surveillance footage shows a man wrapped in a Palestinian flag walking away from the scene holding 2 gas canisters. Look at this guy. I mean, come on, guys. Are we really this stupid? So this guy has a very weirdly wrapped keep. Well, it's a version of a keep on his head, or rather, maybe it's a different name if it's red and white, and a Palestinian flag tied around his waist to go in and attack the synagogue. I mean, come on. I mean, of course, anything's possible. But with all of the many different lies we've seen and they've been caught in, whether being faking stabbed in the eye or lied about chanting the Jews, we kill all the Jews, whatever. Over and over, they keep getting caught and saying that didn't happen. Or no, here's the person who did it. And he's an Israeli. Over and over. I'm not saying racism doesn't exist or doesn't exist. I'm not saying there's no examples of people on the Palestinian protesting side that have done acts of violence. What I'm saying is it's overwhelmingly clear how many of these have been deliberately faked by the entity that has built an identity around psychological operations. Absolute lie. I mean, what's the Mossad motto legitimately is through deception, thou shalt conduct war or something like that. That's what they are. And now we have this example. Here's what, of course, and now you can't see the image. So funny. See if it loads this time. There it is, of course. And this is a Middle East Eye article, which you should read. And there's a lot of background around this. The Israeli undercover agents with a history of dressing like Palestinians. It's a very, very common tactic. And I quite frankly think that's responsible for a lot of what we're talking about. It's just crazy how often this is happening right now. Now, here's a clip from Ben Swan that I want to play. We've talked a lot and played the clip for you a lot about his former head of Shin Bet, former Prime Minister Barak openly telling you that they have funded Hamas right up until October 7th. We have the Mossad chief who went to Qatar in 2020 to petition Qatar to keep funding Hamas. And we've shown you that they said it's because their stated policy in the Likud meeting and their Likud policy, Likud being Netanyahu's party, that their policy is to fund Hamas to keep them divided and keep Palestinians divided so they don't have to give them a two-state solution. It's literally on the record. Haaretz, as I've shown you 1,000 times, wrote an article about it. And yet here we are in the United States where our government tells us we're racist for pointing out that supposed lie. Here's Ben doing an excellent 5-minute breakdown of how this is clear. Not only do they help create them, and you could make the point about that they created them. Now, I'm not saying from whole cloth, but there's an entity that they literally turned into what this was and then kept them in this position to keep them to hurt the Palestinian people. And realize the whole time in the media, in the Western sphere, Israel, Netanyahu was pretending to be fighting for a two-state solution. Just straight up lying to you. And that is an important thing around all of this.
More than 300 days ago, when Hamas carried out their October 7th attack on Israel, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu likened the attack to Pearl Harbor and even the Holocaust. Enemies of civilization, bloodthirsty terrorists, savages, genocidal barbarians, and Nazis. These are all words that Netanyahu and other Israeli officials have used to describe Hamas. So it might come as a little bit of a surprise that Israel, while designating Hamas a terrorist organization, has been consistently supporting these genocidal barbarians with suitcases filled with hundreds of millions of dollars in cash. I'm investigative journalist Ben Swan, and this is Reckoning Israel and Gaza. Although Israeli support for Hamas was happening as recently as last year, it began in the 1980s. See, in the 1980s, Israel directly supported Hamas because they wanted it to become more powerful as a governing authority than the secular, non-religious PLO, or Palestinian Liberation Organization.
Now, really quickly, that's an important point that I've made a lot. Right there, you have an example of a more moderate entity. No matter what you think about the narratives around it all, it's very easy to see. Even if you think they're all crazy, the point is they were far less extreme on paper. And the idea is, well, we don't want to work with, rather even more so that the group doesn't want to work with us because we're an occupier, because we're a belligerent entity, because we're rapist and murder, whatever it is. So the point is they aren't able to be manipulated. And this is basically U.S. foreign policy. So they seek out the radical and go, hey, we'll give you money and arms if you just start causing chaos for that group we don't like. And then it even potentially just take power, and then we get to work through you, and you can do whatever, rape, murder, I don't care, as long as we get the resources and we get control. If you think that's not the reality, you're lying to yourself. It may be a little bit more peppered with some kind of lie about good things, but it's the obvious truth. So in this case, or any other dynamic of the Middle East-Israel overlap, the U.S. government and Israel have funded the most radical elements of what they claim they're fighting as far back as you look. For this kind of purpose, or simply to conduct destabilization tactics against their enemies to be able to either occupy them with another leader they want or regime change, or whatever. That's the reality. And so right here, you can see that happening. Now, from there forward, if you want to pretend that it's anybody else's fault other than the people making that the reality, then you're lying to yourself. Palestinians are left with, I mean, look at it like this. Even if you want to pretend that they voted in Hamas 2006, which I still don't think is even, the idea that they would have ever let them pick is sort of naive, but I guess it's certainly possible. My point is, it's like their own two-party illusion. You're presenting them with choices where they're desperate. They don't get to really decide. It's ultimately something Israel manufactured. We saw that. They gave them the money to make this happen. Then turn that into their response, basically make it about the fact that they're terrorists because of what they created. And on top of that, realizing that if you're in a Palestinian position, you've been occupied, suppressed, raped, tortured, murdered for decades, you might just lean into a group that's willing to take out violence on the occupier. But in any sense, the point is right here, you can see that they manufactured this current reality. So when they scream and go, look at what Hamas is, and we can't allow people that would support that to work, well, then that's you. You support that. You are the one using that group to stop what Palestinians could be. That is the real point, the real focal point.
It's a name you haven't heard in a while. See, Israel knew that in the 1980s, Israel directly supported Hamas because they wanted it to become more powerful as a governing authority than the secular, non-religious PLO, or Palestinian Liberation Organization. That's a name you haven't heard in a while. See, Israel knew that turning a national struggle into a religious struggle, or a jihad, would allow Israel to frame Palestinian liberation as the aim of only Islamic fanatics. Former Israeli General Yitzhak Pundak told the New York Times, quote, "The Israeli government gave me a budget, and the military government gave me a budget, and I financed the opening of as many mosques and schools as possible."
Just think about that for a second. So everything we're talking about, whether these groups that are being started, the, Patriot Front and all these different things, that's part of this larger game. I'm convinced, or the Azov movement. I mean, this is what they've done. They've been spreading and funding and growing these radical entities to be used and thrown at people they want. I mean, the settler movement in Israel is basically the same thing. Look at what they're doing and what they've become. And they're even using that as a threat from the Gavir sort of, what's his name? Lior Dior, Liav Dior, like the rabbi of the most extremist elements in their group. Even Netanyahu called them sort of like the leadership of this group. They have this massive settler belligerent movement they'll attack Israelis. That's what we're seeing. They have done this everywhere. And they're telling you right there, we have manufactured this. And then we point to these things and say, look at how crazy they are. And you've got right-wing entities in this country that are going, that's the problem. Look at how it's overtaking the world. Guess what? You're pointing at what Israel's doing. And your government's funding that.
We wanted to strengthen Islamic institutions. Well, for decades, this social support system cultivated the political and religious ideologies that now drive Hamas militants. Adults who once attended the very mosques and schools directly funded by Israel. It wasn't merely about supporting Islamism and passively wishing it would yield religious leadership. Israel actively engineered Hamas's takeover of Gaza. According to a leaked diplomatic cable published by WikiLeaks, Israeli Defense Intelligence Chief Amos Yadlin explicitly said in 2007 that, quote, Israel would be happy if Hamas took over Gaza because the IDF could then deal with Gaza as a hostile state, end quote. So in 2012, with the explicit permission of Israel, the government of Qatar began delivering suitcases filled with millions of dollars in cash every month.
Now, this is the important part. Delivering cash in suitcases. Not going into some bank account, right? Not being used to buy humanitarian aid because in this location, you can't. It's shipped in for the very reason that they don't have, because Israel's manufactured that. And really, it's the kind of same dynamic we see of U.S. government foreign policy of occupying a nation and forcing them to outsource everything and only produce what they need for the U.S. government's needs in the immediate moment. So then they're in a position where, should they need to, that rug's pulled and they can't manage themselves anymore. That's because they were driven there. Same idea here, right? We're in a situation where they have allowed that to be the reality, right? And so ultimately, the aid or the restrictions of water and food and resources has driven them into a desperate position where they can bring in what they need and make it look like they're unable to manage themselves, right? So they gave them money, and what are they going to get? Weapons. That's what it is. That's the reality of what this dynamic was. And so the point is, it shows you that this was the creation of what they were growing.
To the ruling party in Gaza, Hamas. According to Israeli newspaper Haaretz, Qatar delivered $1.1 billion in U.S. cash and Qatari rials from 2012 to 2019. While working in Gaza, Reuters photographer Ibrahim Abu Mustafa took photos of Hamas government employees after they received their monthly salary in U.S. dollars. Israeli journalist Barak Ravid noted that, quote, Israel's coordination with Qatar over the transfer of money to Gaza is one of the most bizarre elements of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's a paradox where Israel allows funds to Hamas while considering them a terrorist organization, end quote. So why? Israel facilitated the transfer of more than $1 billion to Hamas for political reasons. By bolstering Hamas and ensuring they remain the dominant political force in Gaza, Israel effectively minimized the chances of the more secular Palestinian Authority, which already controls the West Bank, from coming to power in Gaza.
Now, I would add, too, that I think that a lot has changed, right? So from 2006 forward, and this is the confusing part about where I don't even know for sure where I feel like that group is, or whether there's kind of a fractured entity, that clearly I think there's a part of this where people have grown up and joined this group, and the very root of it, that, it's changed. The dynamic of the group has changed. I still think very clearly that there are people that are influenced by Israel within this group, but I also think it's clear that it has shifted into something that is part resistance entity against what Israel's doing. So, I mean, it's up for each viewer to decide based on the facts, but it's important to see the nuance there. But overall, U.S. money going to fund what they were calling terrorism. Like, while they were saying that right up until before October 7th, guys, that's mind-blowing. That's not part of the conversation. What it really shows you is that people at the core of this conversation, the Western media, they all know this. They're ignoring it. What does that show you?
See, the strategy hinders the formation of a unified Palestinian state. And Netanyahu, well, he actually said this during political party meetings in 2019. According to Haaretz, Netanyahu told other members of his party that, quote, anyone who is against the Palestinian state should be for sending money to Gaza because keeping Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank helps to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. In an interview with German media, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Omer said, quote, Netanyahu supported and advanced Hamas in Gaza. Netanyahu wanted to keep Hamas alive because he thought that if Hamas would remain in power in Gaza, it would divide the Palestinians between the West Bank and Gaza, and so it would prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state.
Every time all these U.S. politicians stand up and scream about how you're the one stop, they don't want that, or they're too dumb to know they're being played. Simple as that.
This strategy of channeling billions of dollars to their so-called greatest enemy backfired on Israel when Hamas launched its cross-border attack on October 7th.
Now, there's another point to add there, though, that just to consider. Now, I honestly don't lean this way. I feel like there's too much to kind of water this down. But at the end of the day, it's also possible, at least possible, not likely in my opinion, but possible that this was part of a manufactured effort as well. All the weird foreknowledge and stuff. But I've spoken to a lot of people that I highly respect that seem to feel that that's just not the case. Now, I have my own opinion. I still think that there's some openings there that are that I won't close until I feel that there's more definitive information. Like that it's certainly possible that some element of their government wanted this to happen, or part of it didn't know it would be what it was. I don't know. But that's at least something to consider, right? If we know and we can see a money trail to a group that later did this and how they did it doesn't seem to add up, we obviously should leave that open for possibility. That's just being objective.
For Americans, not only are we not told this incredibly crucial, maybe the most crucial part of this entire story between Israel and Hamas, but we're also left footing the bill, using billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars to defend Israel from a monster that Israel itself helped to create. As the former Israeli religious affairs head, Avner Cohen said, quote, Hamas, to my great regret, is Israel's creation, end quote. If you haven't already, you can follow us on X at truth_in_media, or you can follow this series by signing up to see each episode as it comes out at truthinmedia.com. And at Truth in Media, you'll find the transcript of this story along with all of the source articles. Check them out for yourself and stay tuned as we continue to unveil the truth around Israel's war on Gaza.
It's important. I think Ben did a great job. I mean, he hit, for the most part, every point. He even added points there that I don't think we've talked about. Right? The idea is clearly that there's no question that this was funding the group that they claim was terrorists, that they did, and they funded them for the explicit purpose of stopping what publicly they were saying that they were wanting, and it was only because of the Palestinians that they couldn't get it to happen. What more do we really need to see to understand how bad this all is? This is why people are invested in this, just don't want you to see it. And that goes to people in the paradigm, in this country, goes to international entities, to our government in general, what they're doing around the world, Israel, obviously, and what they're doing to the Palestinians as we speak. Now, here is a great clip that I'm going to play before we get into the two-party illusion aspect of this. And there's a reason that I wanted you to see all this, because the people we're going to talk about next, you have to realize that they're not only okay with all this, they're supporting all this. And if you think for 1 second that they can't see what we're talking about, you're lying to yourself. So here on BBC, Miriam Barghouti is speaking with BBC from Ramallah and just lays it out. And very clearly, the way she says it is important, and the way that they respond on BBC, I think, is also important. And it really just shows you, not just in Gaza, but the West Bank, or really just to Palestinians, that this is a deliberate extermination campaign out of hate, wanting the people to suffer.
We have heard some Israeli politicians being vocal in their opposition to what's going on. How unusual is it to hear that sort of criticism?
So you have these Israeli policymakers essentially enforcing a genocide just a couple of dozen kilometers west of the West Bank, and at the same time saying, oh, this is abhorrent, or we condemn this act. And again, you need to remember that these settlers are part of the Israeli system, that the Israeli government has placed them illegally in the West Bank as part of the annexation. Now, the condemnation from Israeli policymakers comes from the strategy within the Israeli military, and that is called perception shaping.
This is really important. It's what we keep talking about. The idea that they will just come out and be like, that shouldn't have happened, and we're going to investigate that guy. Or occasionally give you one token to be like, oh, we're going to put him in jail, and then they quietly let him out like 3 days later and don't tell you that. Constantly happens. So the point is that when she's highlighting, look at what they said online. People say a lot of things. Look at what they continue to do. Look at how they follow through with that action. Look at how they gaslight you around the obvious. That's what matters. So she's highlighting that they come out and pretend they care, and BBC, that's what they want to hear. Well, they said that they're sorry. Well, is that really what you care about? The reality is they're continuing to murder children, and then occasionally go, that one was wrong. That's all you get. That's kind of a similar dynamic we're seeing with the two-party aspect.
And it is a policy that they enforce in order to maintain a semi-image of being a moral army, or being a regime that values human life and values legal regulation.
I just must go back to a word that you used a moment ago. It is a fact that many international members of the international community regard these settlements as illegal. But you just used the word genocide. Is that in relation to what's happening in the West Bank? Are you really using that word?
So I'm speaking about the genocide that is happening in Gaza. Now, what is happening in Palestine, and you need to remember, Gaza is not a separate entity from Palestine, which seems to be the trend in media. Israel is enforcing spatiocide, and that includes the annexation of territory and the depopulation of villages. In the West Bank, we have witnessed an unprecedented rate of Israeli settler annexation of Palestinian lands and actual depopulation of towns and areas within the West Bank. So that does fall within the overall Israeli strategy of ethnic cleansing. And if that word makes you uncomfortable, I recommend that you go and actually see what ethnic cleansing means, because Israel has de facto implemented every part of what that phrase entails.
Well, of course.
So yes, I do place it in that same category.
Well, of course, Israel would deny that completely, and even members of the international community would challenge some of what you've just said. What is the mood? What is the anticipation, though, in the West Bank of what might happen next, and how is the temperature lowered? Just briefly, if you would.
Of course, Israel would refute that, and parts of the international community. Like I said, this is part of Israel's perception shaping strategy.
Can we move on to the question? The question. Sorry, Mariam Baghouti. My question is, what's the anticipation in the West Bank of what might happen next, and what needs to happen to bring the temperature down?
Right. So the anticipation in the West Bank is part of how you just responded to me. So Palestinians are expecting, especially international media correspondents, to devalue what is happening here and semi-legitimize it.
I didn't do that at all. I'm sorry, Mariam Baghouti.
To be clear, what's funny about it is she didn't say that she was doing that, and that was the insinuation, but she just broadly said that people in Palestine expect the media to do that. It's funny, and I see this a lot lately, how people... They sense, even if you didn't say, I'm not doing that. It's like, well, she didn't really say you're doing that. But the fact that you responded that way makes it kind of seem like you're doing that.
Is part of how you just responded to me. So Palestinians are expecting, especially international media correspondents, to devalue what is happening here and semi-legitimize it.
I didn't do that at all. I'm sorry, Mariam Baghouti, I did not do that at all. I did not do that at all. I'm asking you to tell me what the anticipation is. I'm asking you to tell me what the mood is and the anticipation is of Palestinians in the West Bank. That isn't devaluing anything that has happened at all. And we have just reported that the British Foreign Secretary has condemned the settler violence. Please answer my question.
As I said, perception shaping. You can go back to this interview and see how you devalued it. As in, for what is the situation in the West Bank, Palestinians are frightened. They are terribly frightened. You have a population that has gone rogue. This is a de facto rogue regime that has psychopathic tendencies. And at the same time, there is a disregard to the fact that Palestinians are facing this completely unprotected. While on the one hand, you're having settlers being armed with assault rifles, M16s, Israeli military is using drone warfare of the Hermes 450 specifically from Elbit systems within the UK against Palestinians. We have had nearly 700 Palestinians killed in the last 10 months. So in terms of anticipation
in the West Bank,
it hinges on what the international community will allow to persist, notwithstanding Israeli comments, notwithstanding your coverage of who condemned what, but in practice, in actual live practice.
Mariam Baghouti, thank you very much for talking to us here on BBC News.
I love it. I think she just absolutely nailed her. She did a great job. I like her, by the way. I think it's important to see. Not only how they're, I don't even think people like her right there really understand fully what they're doing. Like, they're just talking heads. Now, somebody in the chat said, I would say whoever funds Hamas is irrelevant. Now, I just want to make sure we understand that what I'm saying at the very least is I'm not trying to say that there's part of it for sure about influence and action. I did make a point about that, but I'm not saying that is the only point we're making. That therefore the person that funds them is responsible for what happened. That's not what I'm even getting at, really. There's a side point there. The main point that I'm making there is that if Israel's going to take the stance that they're fighting terrorism and that the people that represent that are the ones that support this group, that includes them financially, which allowed them to be and grow into the thing. And I think part of that's what they grew them into as well, that they then point at. So if how is that's not the most relevant part of the conversation, I don't know. Because what you're showing is that Israel is lying about, one, what they're creating to justify their action, which is murder against innocent people, as well as the fact that they're not this innocent entity fighting against bad guy terrorism when they're the ones that made sure it was the case. I mean, that's the definition of relevant, in my opinion, but we can all have our own opinions. Now, here is the point we're going to get into next. The idea of the two-party illusion and the concern we have that I started with. And so realizing how relevant it is, not only because of your tax dollars, all around the world for that matter, but speaking to Americans, going to fund this, that every aspect of this is being allowed not insulated, but bolstered and grown with U.S. support. If U.S. government was not supporting this, it wouldn't be happening. I mean, literally, they would not have the means to continue. So if we can't consider this as a relevant and important talking point around the election, I mean, I don't even know how it's possible. A genocide being conducted with your tax dollars and them leading this and deriving. I mean, my God, this is an American genocide on top of Israel. There's no way around that. Rather specifically, to be clear, from my opinion, and a U.S. government genocide. No question. So when we can see that almost everybody involved that we're supposedly choosing between are all going, yep, that's going to continue. Yes, I support that. We have to recognize how disconcerting that is for what they're presenting as what we are when we're not them, as well as the fact that there's really no choice away from this with this controlled dynamic, which should show you that it's not honest. But Trump just tapped RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard for his presidential transition team. Very interesting. Now, I haven't addressed the other part of the title today, which honestly, I've kind of put it out there to kind of, I find it to be a very interesting talking point. Now, I'll actually wait, I'm going to get to it more in a second, but the idea that, look, the Democrats have taken over the Republican Party. Now, you guys all know my opinion about the illusion within that, but what's fascinating to me is this narrative that, the Democrats are inherent evil and they're the bad guy, but when it really, I think they're all just as ridiculous. But then all of a sudden you recognize as they're now trying to promote, but guess what? Everyone currently in the leadership, they all used to be Democrats, which shows you everyone's coming to the Republican Party. But what's funny about that is like, okay, well, wait a minute. Wouldn't you stand back and go, hold on. Shouldn't I be at least suspicious that maybe this is some kind of an internal Democrat coup of the Republican Party? Like, I don't even say I think that. I think it's funny that the willingness to ignore the kind of the concern, it's just a blind support. That's what I'm trying to show you there. And the reality that at the end of the day, none of these narratives really line up at all. It's ideologue support for what you pretend. It's the team sport politics. And there's no consistency amongst these people at all anymore. Look at what they're actually pretending they stand for. If Gabbard and RFK and Gabbard are much more in line, but the idea is clearly that they are not. And the idea is, I guess, because they're there now, that's going to change Trump's policy. That's ridiculous. If you think for 1 second that this is now like I saw a tweet that made me laugh. No, this is great. Now we add RFK, and now we got Trump's account. Now we're pro health and we're pro this. And we're pro. What do you mean you're now that? It's like these are trading cards. You don't get the attributes of RFK because he joined some kind of a team. I mean, can't be this childish. The reality is that they are simply people and mostly are telling you a lot of what you want to hear. I'd like to believe that some of them might be different, but they've shown you that's not true. To pretend that these are like attributes that you're collecting like on like some notches on your belt. What they truly do in the administration is what matters. The rest of it's narrative. We already saw with Trump's administration before, or literally everyone before that in history, or I shouldn't say that, but ultimately that we can see from what we're dealing with here that they did not follow through with what they said they were going to do. So we're just holding on to what they tell you from politicians that have been caught lying over and over. So we talked a lot about the idea of RFK and the joining. I mean, quite frankly, I think it's obvious. I talked about it with Derek's interview. It's principle we're talking about. Now, I get it. What he put out in regard to joining Trump's team, there's a logical statement there. It made sense. But I just don't understand how we can pretend that you're doing this to change the system, one, to fight against the injection and medical freedom and that kind of force dynamic when Trump literally drove Operation Warp Speed and still to this day defends the injection as a positive thing, that you're somehow going to fall into that. And the guy, big business, authoritarian, openly supporting Israel's genocide. Like how in any way, I mean, Trump supports big business. You think that's going to end up supporting against big pharma? I mean, it's amazing that we can't reconcile these things. And at the end of the day, people just don't want to. So my point is, if you're RFK, you sacrifice your principles to pretend, or I guess to maybe hope that you could maybe influence in a positive direction. Like if you think that that's the only way to make change, then maybe you agree with that. But my point is, that is more of the same. If you wanted something different, then he should have stuck this out, tried to gain 4%, try to start a new party, gain that extra money, and then roll it into the next year and like literally try to change this. By the way, that's what people who supported him were actually supporting. Difference, change, not the same thing. not falling into the same two parties that they were leaning into him because of them. Now, I've seen a lot of people that are shifting around because I guess they think this is some kind of monumental thing, and I hope it is. I hope I'm wrong. The sad reality is him falling into that turned it into the same old thing. And frankly, my gut tells me that was always going to happen. With Gabbard joining, I mean, it just seems like, as I said before, I think it's right here. If RFK, Elon, and Elon, which by the way is a part of this, ends up in Trump's administration, I'll be convinced that this was always the plan. Either way, I feel like we're pretty screwed with all this because with what it will create when the 3 and now the 4, maybe you wouldn't call her the most worshipped, but definitely high up there, people that follow her, the most worshipped political figures today, merge their sycophant followers into one obsessive hero worshipping blob. It's just terrifying. Like the amount of influence and control over the conversation with this many. I mean, again, and you can prove Gabbard supporters. How in the world are we pretending they align with Trump supporters? I mean, like from not like the ridiculous aspect of any supporting group. And I mean, like the people that stand by the issues, even. It does not make sense. Now, I would be the first to say that if we're actually doing this, that's good. We should have some kind of overlap and conversation, but that's not what's going to happen. They're not saying, let's compromise on what you think the Republican leadership is going to compromise on what they believe. Look at what they're saying. It's not the reality. Now, here's Eva Bartlett making a very obvious point. And well, first, here's RFK Jr. This is how this is being presented like we're children. Wonder Woman just joined the Justice League. Quite frankly, I find that to be pretty patronizing. Maybe just trying to make a funny point. I don't know. But I think this feels ridiculous to me, especially when you see things like this. Trump team unity. That's what it says. It's got Vivek back there, Elon, RFK. You know, this is just a meme somebody made. And then here's Viva Frey. Yes, sir. Really? I mean, I'm embarrassed for people that are falling into this. Is embarrassing. This hero worship it's embarrassing. It makes me feel uncomfortable for them that anybody is going, yeah. Like, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, this is not some kind of a high school election. This is crazy to me that we're leaning into this based on some kind of like trading card lineup. It's weird to me. Wonder Woman joined the Justice League, and Eva Bartlett says the U.S. is effing circus. Justice League equals slavishly pro-Zionist, because that's what we're talking about here. Every single one of them are willing to support what's going on in Israel. And the comedian says, yeah, they make everything into a Hollywood movie and people just gobble it up. Both sides are bought by the same lobby. Exactly. Now here, in case you were for a moment going, but Tulsi Gabbard doesn't think that. Well, here's what she had to say.
Answer. I think Israel's approach has to be in recognizing that delineation as far as possible. And I know it's tough when you have a terrorist group like Hamas that is so interwoven within the community of people in.
Okay, so here's where you would go, and Israel funded that into reality, but that's not part of the conversation. Doesn't that seem like not just relevant, but paramount? That's majorly consequential to the entire point, but that never gets brought into it.
In Gaza. But to recognize that there should be, and there is a shared purpose there for the Palestinian people to be able to live free and in peace and not under the oppression of this terrorist group.
Right. So are you talking about Israel? Because that's the oppression they're under. This game they play where somehow Hamas has the Palestinian people under their thumb, it's just simply not true. Now, you can argue they're a terrorist group if you want, but that's just simply not the reality that they are somehow oppressing the Palestinian people. It's not true. It's just simply, and this is one of these things we're talking about, is an objective reality. And even if you want to pretend that, Israel, more than anything I've ever seen in my lifetime, is oppressing everything around it. Most importantly, the Palestinian people, based on everything, international law, and she doesn't know that, you think? This whole facade, which I'm convinced it is now, based on these, many different stances now that don't jive with the presentation she puts forward, is just that it is not real to me. How you can put forward this very sane, measured anti-war perspective and then make this argument I don't care if this is this is a good point to make. There's some people right now thinking, oh, she's just saying that because of politics. You know that. The same thing. Oh, Trump just said that because he wants to get elected. Oh, RFK supporting Israel just so he gets in power. I'm done with this. These are people that do not have principles. If what you're going to tell me is, oh, yeah, I'll let Israel murder some children, and then once I get elected, I'll change it. Or Trump saying, well, I'll just support the injection until I get into power. And then, so you're willing to accept genocide and murder and whatever else you want to call these things just so, oh, then once we get power, we'll turn it back. I mean, so they're just as bad as anybody else. The idea that you can make this statement make sense with what she pretends she supports is beyond me.
Be able to live free and in peace and not under the oppression of this terrorist group, just as the people of Israel would like to live in peace and free from the threat of attack from a terrorist group that wants to exterminate.
Yeah, you mean the group that Israel funded into reality, but we won't get into that part of it, right? It's all the Palestinians' fault all the time about the group that Israel funded into power to stop the Palestinians. I mean, guys, this cannot be a side point. This has to be a talking point in this conversation. Why don't they bring it up? Because they're not honest. I mean, or God forbid, they're that shockingly uninformed and they're acting belligerently with military force without knowing what's going on. Either way, guys, we need to be honest about this. Principle matters. Vanessa says, and Tulsi Gabbard joined the Zionist Dream Team. Now, same tweet from RFK Jr., and here's James saying, let's go. We have a country to save. And there's this, they remember that weird AI dancing thing that went out with Trump and Elon? Well, now they've made it something bigger. Now you got Vance and Tulsi. And I mean, this is a clown show. It's not one side or the other. This is just embarrassing. This game acting like this is all some kind of a fantasy team pick. Same thing. Team unity assembled. My God, you can't see this as hero worship? This is cult level. Now, on top of that, just as of today, Trump indicted in a second time an election subversion case. Now, look, I was said then, and I'll say it now, this is clear political persecution. But my point, what ultimately happens with any of this? I had never seen any of these people actually get held accountable. Shouldn't that at least give you pause to make you wonder whether or not none of it's real? I mean, or at the very least, that this is all just flimsy because they can work their way out of it since they're powerful. However you look at it, once this all passes, mark my words, and whatever actually happens, like on what you're shown, however dirty it gets and whatever moves are made and lawyers speak and things are said in front of Congress, if at the end of the day, nobody gets held accountable, or even if you think this is completely baseless, if nothing happens at all on either side and it all goes forward and the only thing that changed was all the supporters go, see, they're trying to stop him because he's the one, he's the good guy. Couldn't you at least ask whether that wasn't actually what happened? I'm convinced that everything right now is driving to support Trump. I know that's not even popular within this community. I know a lot of people don't think that makes sense. I'm just giving you my opinion, and I've been clear about that being my opinion. But at the end of the day, everything that keeps trickling forward seems to be lined up to go. I mean, even Democrats, as we all keep talking about, we all know that they don't think Kamala is what they pretend she is right now. It's embarrassing. They said she wasn't that 30 seconds ago. So the point is, it's almost like they're trying to guilt. Like if they come out with this fake narrative, how Kamala is going to save the world and she's the best, most worshipped here, you're going to have Democrats that go, well, that's ridiculous. We were all laughing about how dumb she is. 30 seconds. Now I'm supposed to pretend that's not the case. Anybody honest is going to go, well, maybe Trump is the real guy. Maybe they are the liars. I feel like that's what's happening. Just at least keep that open in your mind. Because my point is, again, is that the election is a farce where our supposed vote doesn't translate to the outcome, and it should. In a real representative government, that's paramount. I think that's been stolen from us. As at some point, one or everywhere, whether it's left or right, at some point, everyone's willing to acknowledge it, but only on the other side. So we all know we don't want to acknowledge it when we're winning. That's a childish thing to do. So this, to me, is one more thing in that step that's going to drive people to go, well, come on, he's clearly being persecuted, so how can he be on their side? Well, let's wait and see what happens. Man, I mean this every time I say it. I genuinely hope that you're right about what you think he is and that he is going to save us all from what's coming. I really hope that. Who wouldn't? I just think there's too much going on that shows us that's not real. And again, that's not being blackpilled. That's about highlighting that the fake choice, that the people that are doing this to you are putting in front of you is not the real choice. Hey, give me Ron Paul. I'll vote for him right now. Give me plenty of other people out there that I believe actually have good intentions for positive change, and I will support them whether or not you think the vote's part of it. 100%. That's the illusion that we pretend that one person from left and right, when 40+% of the population registers as independent, is somehow your choices. Guys, I mean, it's just so obvious. And I know everybody who is not part of the Team Sport Politics mania sees it, but most of you still get pulled into voting one side or the other. I'm not even trying to get into the voting conversation now because that's an easy way to scare people right back into it because you don't feel like you have any other options. All I'm trying to get at is for people to be honest about what we're dealing with. You want to vote for them and you think it's going to make a difference, I'll never dissuade you from that. Do what you think is right. But we need to be honest about who these people are before you go into that. Now here's Thomas Massey making a valid point. I like what he's been saying. Elon Musk, again, points out what Mike Lee says, Chuck Schumer removed the mask. Democrat victory equals this, which, okay. Don't you love how these games go? Well, you know, people say a lot of things, especially politicians. Now, I'm not going to say, for we know it's exactly what's going to happen. But all I'm saying is this is something somebody's saying, when this happens, this will happen. And then this whole narrative, my point is, if you think for 1 second, I should finish the point. What they're saying is, what this means is permanent Democrat rule forever. Okay, I don't even know why in the world that would only, at the end of the day, again, my opinion, they're all the government. It's a game, left and right, making you think you're fighting. They're the government convincing you to basically justify why Trump is in power. Because the point here is that this is a person who's saying, if this, we're going to do that. And the idea is that no more filibuster. And we're going to make sure we always control the... And Elon says, worth understanding that the implications of this turn America into a one-party state. Well, guess what? You're already there, ladies and gentlemen. And what's funny about it is even the Republicans are saying that because that's my point from before. It's a uniparty. The Republicans have joined the Democrats, and now we're fighting against that. Okay, so if everybody believes we're already in a one-party, uniparty situation for the most part, how do you make sense of this? That you're telling us that you're going to continue to do that? And the narratives are so splintered, and it doesn't make any, it's all about saying, side with the people we're justifying right now. And every election I'm going to play a clip in a minute. Both sides are saying the most important election of your lifetime. But guess what? Everyone seems to think that now. Funny how it happens every 2 years, literally every 2 years, not just presidential elections. Every 2 years, somebody says this is the most important election. And we used to all laugh at how dumb that was, but apparently everyone's drinking it up right now, at least within the paradigm. Thomas Massey comes in with some logic and says, to be honest, we kind of already have that. Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries voted to keep Mike Johnson as speaker. Hold on a minute. So you mean there's an overlap and they're helping keep a Republican in power? Yeah, because it's not really what's going on. They're not really as divided as they pretend. And it says a few months ago when we forced the question, thus exposing the uniparty that exists. So Thomas Massey is hauling out that the illusion that the Republican Party is somehow the last saving grace against the Democrats. They're going to take over the world. Do you realize this is the narrative literally every time, but at different levels of concern? And on top of that, I just made this point. So we have Tulsi Gabbard, the Democrat. Okay. Donald Trump used to be a Democrat. Okay. Elon used to be a Democrat. Hold on a minute. So are you saying now that the Republicans are supposed to be like the Democrats are the ones that see it? Are you saying the Democrats that have shifted are somehow the only ones that are worthy of? I just don't even know how you make sense of that without laughing at how ridiculous this all is. And now here, Just a Thought made a good point in all this. And I'll come back to that because I have the tweet that I'll make a point about it. She says, why would the most powerful empire in the world allow a president to come in and take the power? Now, this is the point a lot of people have made. George Carlin has a famous joke about it, right? If voting had any effect, they wouldn't let you do it. We love to laugh about that, but it's more honest and real than you realize. Now, it doesn't have to be that it's always been that way, but let's ask ourselves, if you get to a position where we all see it, this rising, whether you're New World Order or One World Government, or whatever you see building, you see the centralization of power. And we're going to pretend that when they've never been more centralized, they're going to go, okay, just hope we win this time. I mean, really? I mean, we have to acknowledge how naive that is. I mean, we have decades-long plans, and they're going to just hope they keep winning and staying in power? I mean, come on. I mean, we really have to be honest about how silly that sounds. She says, where is the logic in this? If Trump or RFK Jr. are such threats to the establishment, do you really think they would be allowed to waltz in the White House and force them to relinquish their power? Now, some people go, well, they just tried to kill him. Well, I think there's very clear reason to ask what actually happened there. I'm not even saying that I'm convinced that it was fake or whatever else. I'm just saying for whatever, we ended up at a point where nothing adds up and we're all moving forward. Guy didn't even have an injury on his ear, for F's sake. I don't understand how we have to convince people there's something wrong there. But whatever, I'm the crazy one. And it says, how would they do this in regard to forcing to relinquish power? With guns, drones, military? Would they just ask nicely? And this behemoth of power would say, sure, forget the centuries of war and genocide that we've manufactured to attain this. Forget the millions we've starved and the billions we've hoarded in resources. It's all yours now. It's what the people want, after all. Supporting Trump or RFK or Kamala Harris or any politician is not anti-establishment. That is the most true statement of the day, guys. You're voting in the establishment. People in positions of power don't get there by being agitators or disruptors or dissidents, especially in the way the world is now, especially the way the U.S. government is now. And what's funny is we all know that. In certain context, everyone points that out, but not when it comes up against your chosen ideologue. She says, they get there by aligning and pledging allegiance. If you don't see this, I'm sorry, but you are still trapped. I really agree with that. Now, again, that's what they would call blackpilled. But is it? Like, I mean, if you let's just take sake of conversation that she's correct, and I believe she is. How is it blackpilled if what you're trying to do is show people the solution? To say, look, we need to get away from the trap we're in. We've fallen into this cave, and all we see are the shadows on the wall. And if we can't step out of it, we're only going to ever be in this cave. Like, we have to recognize the wool has been pulled over our eyes. To call it blackpilled to try to save people from the illusion is unreal to me. Now, again, even if we're wrong, you can't call that blackpilled because the inherent point is that we're trying to pull you out of what we see as the illusion. Tiberius says, I don't think there's a single reasonable argument to vote for either of the mainstream parties in either the US or the UK ever again. Okay, this brings it down to a much more specific point. Whether you even want to vote. Now, you know my opinion. I made it very clear. I think the evidence is shockingly obvious that we all acknowledge, again, when the context is not, when it works for us, whether they cheat, they steal, voting machines and other countries, whatever we all love to throw in there, we all always admit it except when it matters. Because we all go right back and cycle through. Well, some people do. The point here is that a lot of people, as this guy would do, is argue, well, you just given up. Is that what he's doing? He seems very politically active to me. The guy says, what a cop-out. Okay, and I said the cop-out is pretending that you're more politically active than he is because you check a box every 4 years, or I've said every so often. And that box represents the same government, whichever one. You're on a hamster wheel. He's affecting change. Now, yes, that's my opinion. I guarantee people will disagree. But the overall point is if you think for 1 second that voting process, even if you are actually voting somebody in, is the most politically active thing you can do, my God, you are not paying attention. And then realizing how obvious it is that there are ways they can circumvent your vote. That's not even up for debate. Or going to the level I'm at, in my opinion, well, I believe, but what I'm giving forward as my opinion is that there is no translation, that we have been manipulated to the point to where you are not even engaging in this process. As they love to point at anybody, usually actually fair elections, and say, fake, 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 fake. Why do you think that is? One is control and destabilization, but also to project away from looking at what they're doing and acting like they're the ones calling out fake elections. They can't be the ones blatantly lying to you. Well, yeah, I think they are. But that's the point, is that there's so many other things. Like, so even if you think this makes a difference, realizing that to get you to fall back into a position where that's the only thing you do, well, there's a whole 4-year period there where there's more going on. My point is that there are a lot of people that act like that's the only, if not the most important thing. I disagree. He says, I don't see how being a bystander is affecting change. Okay, so this is the whole point. He's of the mind that if you don't vote, you're not doing anything. That is a very prominent conversation right now, and I think that's important to reflect on. I simply said, if you take bystander from what I wrote, I'm not sure how you tie your shoes in the morning. I mean, really, think about the idea that you're out there trying. I mean, at the end of the day, if you can't recognize that voting is only one part of this, then you're falling for one of the many illusions within this system. Dave Smith says, now that RFK Jr. has effectively ended his campaign, a few thoughts on the impact. As many of you know, I was very critical of his position on Israel, but leaving that aside, this campaign was truly unique in many ways. He made health the focus of his campaign. This is unprecedented. Prioritizing human health meant a full repudiation of the anti-science, anti-human COVID lockdown and vaccine. It also meant dealing with issues that never come up in politics, namely that we lead the world in chronic health issues. This is something. I'm embarrassed to admit it. I paid far too little attention. After Bobby's campaign, it's apparent how insane it is that this is never an issue in national politics. What could possibly be more important than the health of our children? Now, again, realizing that, yes, he has made very good strides in this conversation before this, but realizing how, I mean, just Trump alone, with the interest he has, the business he's tied to, I mean, these people don't care about these things. They care about making you think they do, which is part of why they've brought on the token RFK. Look, now we're pro-environment. No, that's not how that works. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to recognize that just because they're doing this in other contexts doesn't mean, I mean, there's evidence of other overlaps. I mean, just with Israel alone, it's obvious that you can't pretend that you support these things when Israel is, look, I mean, you realize how much the environment is being destroyed based on what they're using? But it says he was heroic on the war in Ukraine, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think a lot of these are statements, not action. Free speech, three-letter agencies, big pharma. Well, again, a lot of this is just what he said he would do. Now, after what he's now done, I question all of that. Action is what I care about. And he's got a lot of great action back before all this. I agree with that. That's why I promoted a lot of what he did before. After his Israel statements, I just have a lot of thought. But it says, on top of all of this, Bobby is genuinely smart and kind man. Well, I don't know him, so I can't speak to that. But that was so refreshing in contemporary politics. The fact that someone who reads books and treats people with decency was running such a contrast to what we were used to. And again, it kind of starts to feel like this, worship, the idea that I don't know how we think we can get these things from people that you're showing people things. Realize that whether or not he was running before, he's a Kennedy. They know they're in the spotlight. A lot of these people are always projecting what they want you to see that they are. I'm not saying I think that. I'm just saying that it's weird that we can start going, he is this and he's a good person. He did that. I don't agree with that. I think it's dangerous. We need to stand back and just treat them like, action matters. That's it. What have you done? What's your track record? It says, I'm glad that RFK ran. I think we're better off country for it. I know I've been hard on him at times, but from the bottom of my heart, thank you for him running. Now, I generally like what he said. I do. I just want to be clear that I'm very resistant to any idea of hero worship. But I said, and this is the main point for me, all that, I even agree with everything he just said, and then he drove all that positive momentum and support right into the hands of Mr. Operation Warp Speed. That's what happened. To me, that's a very hard thing to be okay with. I said, I would love to agree with your take, but that all flies out the window when your last move undermines all of those principles. Moves like this ensure the cycle will never change, which, as far as I'm concerned, was the primary thing his followers thought he was going to change. This person says, Ryan, it would be amazing. Let me go back, make sure I don't miss the. There we go. It says, oh yeah, because this is the one. I'm glad I did that. So this is the one. This person. So I just ended where I just said, so that ensures the cycle will never change. Conservative Nurse Kelly says, so you would rather the Democrats win who mandated the vaccines on tons of Americans? Is that what happened? The ones who are destroying our country, who you truly hate Trump more than you love our country? Okay. Obviously, you know where we're going to go with this. Assumption, obviously. That's no, dummy. I'm not saying two-party illusion. I don't want either of them. But the point is they can't see anything outside of the controlled net. Nothing exists outside of her or him, left or right, a Republican or Democrat. That's all that matters. And just to be clear, Trump initiated the Warp Speed program, which is why this all happened. He initiated the lockdowns. He initiated the emergency. That's the reality. They wouldn't have been able to do any of the lockdowns without his state of emergency and what he began. And the Production Defense Act, which was martial law for production. I mean, guys, these are bad moves in every context, especially now that we know we were all played. And the mandates were only possible and happened during his administration because of what he initiated. Now, it's funny how literally everything anywhere, even from governors, that happens under Biden's administration is Biden did it, which, by the way, kind of usually is the way it goes. They're the president, they're responsible, right? But during Trump's, well, the governors made their own choices. And they did. Sure, there's a level. I mean, they're both are honest. The point is that Trump's administration, he's the president. At the end of the day, his choices allowed that to happen. If it was Biden, and that's what we saw next, everything was his fault. The point is, it's all your government's fault. Your government allowed this to happen. Your government mandated shots. Your government is the problem. So at the end of the day, I don't want either of them. And that's what I'm trying to highlight. The assumption that I must want the opposite, that's back to Trump and Clinton. It's the same thing. You must want Clinton to win then. No, I want a real choice. But and then she says, the ones who are destroying your country, they all are. To them, it's the Democrats. That's it. They're the bad guys. It's very naive. And it says, you truly hate Trump more than you love our country. That seems like a statement. No, that's not true. I don't hate any of them. Really, I think at the end of the day, hate is something reserved for people that are committing genocide. I'll tell you that right now. I hate all those people. But at the end of the day, I just acknowledge what they are. I think these are war criminals that have murdered people. He murdered Soleimani under the cloak of diplomacy. That's a war crime, guys. There's no way around it. He occupied and murdered people in Syria under the guise of fighting Assad. They stole the oil. These are bad criminal moves. On top of that, Israel support is disgusting. These are openly committing genocide people. They're gloating about it. And so my point is, if you want to talk about hating the country, you know who hates the country more than anybody, whether they realize it or not? The people that are blindly acquiescing to the government power structure. You want to look at some of our foreign presidents that go back to our founding fathers? That's what they would tell you. I think it, I forget exactly who it was. Was it, I got the name in my head. Anyway, that ultimately they blindly serve the president. I mean, I could look it up real quick. Is servile. Let me see if it pops up. There it is. Perfect. It is, oh, that's right. Theodore Roosevelt. And again, it's not that I'm saying I love Theodore Roosevelt, which is always, people always do that. How to use the word here. The words are true, whoever says them, if they're true. Let me bring this up so you can see it, so you can, I'll include it in the show notes. Sorry, I'm struggling with my left hand. There we go. So, the point, to announce that there must be no criticism of the president or that we are to stand by the president, right or wrong, is not only unpatriotic and servile, but it is morally treasonable to the American people. All right. So, anyway, in the chat, I'm not supporting Theodore Roosevelt, but the point is that the idea is that is what ultimately we're doing right now. That you are blindly like, yeah, it doesn't matter. She's worse. Well, that is morally treasonable to the American people. That is, I agree with. But I said, nope, embarrassingly wrong assumption. Typical response from one who's lost in the two-party illusion. Trump is Operation Warp Speed. And despite the couched response that we all know you're already typing, they all pushed it on us, the government. Because the point is they all want to say, Trump didn't force it. He let you choose. That's not the reality. Narratives are one thing. At the end of the day, the policy they put in place is why this happened. I said, I hate all of them. Well, I guess it challenges what I just said. The point is that I equally dislike all of them, or you could say hate. I said that in response to what she said. I tend to dislike the word hate in general because I think it ultimately shows an emotional response to something that's not always supposed to be emotional. Like we can have, you get the point. But it says equally, but okay, but aren't they Democrats? Right? Just trying to make that point I was saying before. Like the point is, at the end of the day, if your whole idea is the Democrats are bad and you're fighting the Democrats, it's weird how all these people are just moments ago Democrats. I find that funny. But she says, not at all. The American people don't trust Republicans anymore either because they are in unison with the Democrats creating a uniparty. Okay, see my point? It's why we love Trump. He goes against the grain, as does Elon and RFK. Okay, so they're all Democrats, or at least they were. So what's funny is the idea is that one is the Democrat part, but the two is that ultimately you're talking about the uniparty. Like, that's what we're trying. We are in an illusion. And the idea that you think these people that break out of it for 10 seconds and go, look, we're the ones fighting it and jump right back. You're being played by the same illusion. That's what we're trying to reach you with. That's it. And I said, you just described the two-party illusion. You guys pretend like you see through it, then vote for a Republican. That's pretty willfully naive from where I'm standing. I just hope that will reach somebody out there who doesn't see the broken logic there. Include this for you. I like that quote. Come on. There we go. Here's another statement. This person says, supporting Trump is no different than supporting Harris. You're standing with Zionists who are doing the bidding of corporate parasites. Ty says, it may be an illusion of choice. So keep that in mind through the whole comment. And it's illusion of choice. Okay. If that's what we get, either pick the better illusion or don't pick. Okay. So it's an illusion, which implies that they're not different. We're being played, but you might as well pick the better illusion or don't pick at all. I can't even believe that. Now, again, always remember that these could be bots. That's a flip of the coin these days, legitimately, with how many bots are online, 50% of the internet, way more on it, Twitter. So I think it's more than that. But this is the point I'm making. This is where people are. And they, even when seeing it, they can't break away from it. That is a cult. So I'm the one saying, well, don't pick then. What difference does it make if it's an illusion? We shouldn't just not pick, though. We should be leaning in every possible way and making a big statement about how it's an illusion. That's why I keep talking about abstention. I want to abstain on the record. I want you to tally that. I want you to show people that every single election, now more than ever, more people don't partake than anybody else. And they would love to make that statement on the record to show people at the end of the day if you would actually tally it and be honest about it. Remember, we say this every time. The largest voting bloc in the election, only growing to this point, are people that do not participate. Not because they're lazy or don't want to, but because they see the problem. By and large, look around, ask people. They're like, this is all broken. They're all stealing it. Everything's broken. The machines don't work, whatever it is. Then the largest bloc, usually 40-something% of the people that do, register as independent. And we're still to pretend like the two minorities within all of that are the only choices we get. We are lost in this. So starting over, he says, it may be an illusion of choice. If that's what we get, either pick the better choice or don't pick. Does it matter when it goes on with or without your participation? Well, yes, it would when you give them the allowance to do so. Your vote within the illusion, knowing it's an illusion, is you going, yes, do it again next time, which they may either way. But if your whole point is that it won't change either way, then maybe don't participate in order to keep it going. Maybe try a different path. Maybe stand up and protest that whole thing. Or maybe, you see what I'm saying? Any number of directions. But the idea that this is the adult thing to do, it's just embarrassing. It says there is a real-life affirming movement behind Trump. That's the only thing to hang your hat on. But wait, you just said it was an illusion. You started the statement by saying it's an illusion of choice, or it may be. So might as well pick the better illusion. And then you end by saying, but Trump is real. We get behind that. I can't help but laugh at how ludicrous this all is. And I know you see it. Here's Brad Miller. We read this before. I've endorsed no one for president because no one has earned my vote. And he goes on, I guess we can, I don't want to read the whole thing. We read this before. He's simply saying that he doesn't support any of them. Strategically, from the perspective of putting Trump in the White House, Kennedy's speech was objectively great. I thought he explained his decision exceptionally well, but I disagree with the bedrock premise. I fundamentally disagree with the premise that real change in this country can come via Trump. That's the important part. And he's simply highlighting all these people. He's right in line with me. Right? We had a great conversation about this in our last interview. He's calling it out, just like we are. And this person says, Kennedy actually spoke to citizens like they were real. Harris slammed back a Chardonnay, giggled, yes, queen, and went home. Which is really just, obviously that's not exactly what happened. That's them framing her as being ridiculous, right? Like the whole yes, queen thing. But my point in showing you this, are we really this easy to manipulate? So all they have to do is come out and just act like you matter? Why? Because they counterbalance you with all these creature morons. There you go. Come out and be like, you're real and I care about you. And they go, wow, oh God, vote them in. They're going to win. Like we can't be this simple. And on top of that, realize that why do you think she's so ridiculous? Like, don't we at least consider that this is all, I don't know. It's funny how we all at some point can see that there's clearly a manipulation going on. But then when you have one of the most obvious forms of it slapping you in the face, you just don't want to see it. Whitney Webb says, given all the hype about the RFK Jr. team up with Trump and what it means for healthcare, I have some questions. Many funders of Trump, such as Joe Lonsdale and Elon Musk, as well as J.D. Vance himself, have major investments in biotechnology, gene therapies, and companies deeply invested in mRNA and DNA vaccine technology. Trump stands by, right to this very day, Operation Warp Speed, which produced mRNA vaccines and of dubious efficacy and safety, some of which were made with the help of companies tied to Lonsdale's VC, among others. And here, since I'm not going to get to the other part today, I don't think I'll play this really quickly, just so we don't forget. This is still what he's saying.
More people have died under COVID this year, by the way, under Joe Biden, than under you, and more people took the vaccine this year. So people are questioning how.
Well, no, the vaccine worked, but some people aren't taking it. The ones that get very sick and go to the hospital are the ones that don't take the vaccine. But it's still their choice. And if you take the vaccine, you're protected. Look, the results of the vaccine are very good. And if you do get it, it's a very minor form. People aren't dying when they take the vaccine.
We all know that's false. Everything he said there. No, it's not helping them. Yes, they are. It's causing, I mean, it's incredible. And even Candace was trying to set him up to be like, yeah, it was Biden made it worse. Nope. He doesn't want to do that. He wants to say, I did it. I won. I did the good thing. It's my hubris. It's dangerous. So she goes on to say, will RFK Jr. be opposing the issue of these technologies as he seeks to tackle the chronic disease epidemic in the U.S. in a future Trump administration? Will he allow the health DARPA, ARPA-H, to continue to operate, which, if you don't remember, is a very problematic entity that was created by Trump's daughter, which is really just an extrapolation of the same, began with her. Biden's administration just flipped the H on the other side and told us it was their thing. That's the point. It's all your government, framed with a left-right slant that all goes in the same direction to get you from one side or the other to keep the thing going down the road. It says to continue to operate the DARPA for health, essentially, which should terrify all of us. Will he allow the Peter Thiel and Joe Lonsdale co-founded Palantir to continue to collect and analyze Americans' health data? Continue. And genetic data, with no meaningful oversight into how they use that data, and if they share it with other government agencies, they contract for the CIA. Now, point is, people would love to believe that RFK would be the one to step up and stop that. That's what her point is. Do you really think that's going to happen? Do you think that there'd be so much investment from these people, or, with the Israel overlap or any of these things, that somehow having him there is going to change that dynamic? I hope you're right. But it's pretty naive to think that based on, I don't know, the entire history of this country, every presidential administration it's always the same thing. These are interests of the government that go long back before one administration or the other, and it's all continued. And you can see clearly that Trump is leaning in. I mean, let's not pretend like the Thiel Vance infusion into his administration is not going to guide the whole damn thing. You think that RFK having a concern about Palantir and health data is going to suddenly change that major investment? I just think we're being played. And she says, I agree that there is a major healthcare crisis in the U.S., but identifying the problem is one thing. Will these experimental technologies be used or promoted as part of the solution? I think we all know that's happening. He won't give up on the shot. She says, I think it's important to know, and it seems like not many are asking these questions. She framed that perfectly. I'm giving you my thoughts on it. The point is to frame this in a way that gets people out there that support this to go, well, we should ask that. Vote for Trump if you want, but at least acknowledge that there's a problem here. There's no stated solution from anybody, not Kamala, not Trump. It's very clear that should at least worry you if you see the problem that he keeps hiding, which is the entire point of the injection and where that's all going. But as long as you make it a meme, apparently they're going to fall for it. Maha, make America healthy again. This is for the podcast. It's a picture of Trump and RFK, that famous one with the kind of weak handshake, which I love. Maha. That's as simple as that. That's RFK posted that. Again, I hope, guys, I really hope that's in the bed. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge advocate for the change in the health field, but I just sadly don't think that's what's going to happen. If I'm wrong, I will cheer for that mischaracterization. Because, I mean, again, we should always want that positive thing. I'm just trying to inform you based on what I think is the reality. Now, here is the point I was making before. This is now interesting. I framed that in the title today. Democrats take over the Republican Party. Now, my whole point is that they're one thing. right? So if we can't stand back for a second and go, wait a minute, isn't this interesting how they're sort of look, we were just talking about the whole like trading card dynamic where there's kind of swapping players like some kind of fantasy football team. It's funny to me. Now there's like, well, look at this. They all used to be Democrats. And Rothma says, Democrats are not liberal. They're leftist authoritarians, which Elon then shared and says, yeah, that's what they're turning into. Weird statement, too, by the way, too, because you could be arguing he's talking about this, that says 3 former Democrats who had enough. Okay. Isn't it interesting, though, that you have the leading entities in this administration, at least as it stands, you know, Vance being the aspect of it not included, that are former Democrats? Like from inside the dynamic of how the Democrats are like the biggest boogeyman ever, I find it strange that you wouldn't have some, like if this wasn't the ideologue situation, like it wasn't Trump that they've all put their like faith in, like literally, I would think that a lot of Republicans would be like, man, that's weird. Like we should be concerned about this. Like if all of a sudden Biden and Kamala and everyone, they just switched to Republican and said, we're running for Republicans because we've seen the light. They wouldn't want that. They'd be like, no, the point is that these people have become invested in the ideology of the current, you know, Republican MAGA overlap. So they just don't want to see it. Now, obviously it may not be the case. I just think that's interesting. And overall, what it shows me is that it's all the same damn thing. If they can just swap sides, that means there's no principles. Again, it's not about and this is team sport politics. If we're to pretend that you can just jump to the other side, that means that you never actually held the principles you said, or that they're all very similar, which makes my point for me. Because the idea is we're supposed to believe that the Republicans and Democrats have very different principles. And they list them off. I mean, I think they swap all the time, but they list it off. Here's what we stand for, and here's what they stand for. And then you wake up one day and go, well, all these people over here are bad, so I'm going to jump to the other side? No, if you actually believe you were a Democrat and it was based on your principles, you would say, I am a Democrat, they are not. So let me be the lone person. And hey, I'll even work with the Republicans if I believe that they're good people, but I'm still a Democrat because these are my principles. I don't know why I didn't explain that. The way that they jump, this whole red whale, I'm shifting sides. We should be laughing at how ridiculous that is. But no, it's because they're going, wow, we're going to win. They're taking, we're on, it's like a football game to half these people. And I think we're all starting to see that. Maybe that's what they like. Maybe I'm the one that, maybe we're out of the conversation because everybody enjoys the game and we just, I hope not. No, I honestly have more faith in the human species and especially Americans because of that. I didn't mean it especially as any other country, but I mean more so that in this context, as an American election, I have faith in Americans to see this. That's even a unique thing within the independent media. Again, if you're going to call me blackpilled, acknowledge that's simply not the reality. I have faith in Americans to see the lie. I believe the government misrepresents the illusion. I believe that during COVID-19, everybody was seeing through it. It wasn't a partisan thing. I think right now with Israel, the world around is starting to see through it. What's more positive than that? What I do think I see is that the American-U.S. dynamic is trying to pull us right back in. All of it. So Just a Thought points out, thank God that the guy who said Israel's genocide in Gaza was a moral war, the guy who pushed experimental vaccines on us, and the guy who wants a microchip in our brains are going to save us from the deep state. Hey, maybe. As the QAnon goes, we got to have insiders to fight the inside or whatever the dumb thing is. We still get stuff like that. I've already seen a tweet like that coming out about some of these people. But that's an easy way to pacify people, right? Just trust the plan. They've got it all figured out for you. Well, here's Jill Stein making a great point, but doesn't mean I believe that she's on our side. I'll be real honest about that, is that of all the people, she's the one standout that seems to be really standing against this. But just the way I am, I'm very jaded about all the political spectrum because, I mean, look how far back. Show me one person throughout all this time that we can see that really stands out as the honest and I mean, again, maybe say for a Ron Paul, which I do believe. At the end of the day, I just have a hard time grasping that. But once, if she gives me the proof and the actions going forward, that's the case, I'll support that. Maybe not at the point within a broken voting system, but I'll still say I think she has the right path. Like increasingly feeling that way about Thomas Massey, and I'm probably going to be let down again because that's just how I feel this goes. But either way, my point is that it shouldn't be about you say the right thing, we support you. It should be action. And I think that she has a lot of problematic things like all of them do, siding with the wrong person, but it's all politics to them. They all rationalize compromise, which to me is basically a dirty word in politics. The point, she makes an excellent point right here about Democrats and Republicans, but of course that could be in the interest of getting her to be the one seen. But listen to this, and the point is right. If it sounds like Democrats and Republicans are reading from the same script, it's because they both work for the same donors. Uh-oh, she must be a racist. No, she just recognizes the static and obvious reality that they're being funded by lobbyists.
Will be the most important election in the history of our country.
Oh my God, there it is. Everyone says it.
This election is not only the most important of our lives.
I double down.
It is one of the most important in the life of our nation.
Oh my God, now it's the same thing. It's just our lives, the history of this country. We hear it every single time. You'd think there was even a moment when they started going, I know we say it every time, but this time they just skip past that this time. This is the one forever until the next one. And that one's the most important in your lifetime. Like, it's this kind of point that I hope it breaks through to some people where it's like, well, yeah, it's pretty stupid. It's pretty dumb. They keep saying it every time. And every time it's like fever pitch. It's because it's the only way they can get people buying into such a ridiculous illusion. That's the reality, in my opinion.
Together we will restore vision, strength, competence, and we're going to have a thing called common sense.
A president who leads and listens, who is realistic, practical, and has common sense.
No nation will question our power. No enemy will doubt our might.
That we strengthen, not abdicate, our global leadership.
An economy the likes of which no nation had ever seen. China, we were beating them.
That America, not China, wins the competition for the 21st century.
Isn't this interesting, guys? I mean, it keeps going. The point is the same, is that it's the same thing. Oh, they're communist. No, they're fascist. They're the same thing. Like I said, in my opinion, they're all authoritarian capitalists at the end of the day. As Derek made a great post about today. The complete, essentially I don't even think it's misunderstanding. I think it's a deliberate misrepresentation of what those two things are. Neither of them, not the Republican Party nor the Democrat Party, are those things. But that works for narratives, and everyone loves to get all worked up about the other side. But they're not the other side. They're the same thing. They're pushing. And what's funny about this is they all, like I showed you the Democrat convention and the Republican convention, they're all doing, like you saw the Democrats chanting over a Palestinian protester going, USA, USA. You'd be forgiven for not being able to tell the difference between the two locations. Of course, they would love to say that, but it's all about personal issues. And at the end of the day, government policy is what we're talking about, not the identity that they've convinced you of as individuals. I'm not talking about the team sport politics. There's clear differences, like on the surface, of Republicans and Democrats in this paradigm. I think that's because they're being engineered in their own way through this paradigm. But whatever it is, the point is that from policy, Kamala and Trump, whatever we're talking about, it goes in the same direction. We can look back through history. Narrative shift, agenda stays the same.
Our borders will be totally secure. Our economy will soar. We will return law and order to our streets.
After decades in law enforcement, I know the importance of safety and security, especially at our border. Last year, Joe and I brought together Democrats and conservative Republicans to write the strongest border bill in decades.
We want people to come into our country, but they have to come into our country legally.
Hey, enter the SAVE Act. I'll show you that next. That's a digital ID Trojan horse.
Can create an earned pathway to citizenship and secure our border.
I tell you this, we want our hostages back, and they better be back before I assume office.
Oh, a threat. Uh-oh. Otherwise, he's going to drive peace in the Middle East, right? Yeah, that must be what he means.
Well, you will be paying a very big price.
Oh, never mind. He meant violence. My bad. Obviously, you better give us back. What? I mean, think about what a dumb thing that is to say. Who are you talking to, Trump? You talking to Hamas? Give us back our hostages? You mean the Israeli Americans that got taken from illegal settlements? Give them back to who? What are you talking about? Everybody wants them back other than the Israeli government. But it doesn't matter because it's a good cheer moment to go, yay, he's going to fight bad guys. It's just sad. I'm embarrassed by what a lot of these people do on all sides of the paradigm. If you recognize the reality that they've been intentionally breaking some kind of a deal so that they could stay in power and killing their own people, that's what Israelis are saying. And he stands up and gets a cheer line from Americans who are too stupid to see what's really going on. I shouldn't say that. I'm frustrated by that. But at the end of the day, don't know the reality. It kills me. Kills me. Oh, and he's got a bandage on an ear without an injury because clearly 12 days later, it's completely good to go.
I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself.
And now Iran is very close to having a nuclear weapon.
Oh, yes, here we go again. Despite the U.S. government saying otherwise and the International Atomic Energy Agency saying otherwise. But I wonder where he got that from. Who was the one prominently saying that lie for the last 50 years? Oh, yeah, or Israel. That's right.
I will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend our forces and our interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists.
We gave our military almost $800 billion.
Terrifying.
As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world.
Anybody want to show me the air between these people?
America is on the cusp of a new golden age.
I will make sure that we lead
USA.
the world into the future.
Just like our ancestors, we must now come together.
It is now our turn to do what generations before us have done.
We will press forward, and together we will win.
We are charting a new way forward. Forward.
My God. Guys, this actually scares me. Like, this is terrifying. The reality of how transparently stupid this is. Like, they are literally giving the same speech. And everyone's like, yeah, we got to fight those Democrats who were in the other room going, yes, the same things. Yes, the Republicans are bad. It's crazy. And I know you guys can feel it. And this is what we're trying to fight. This is what we're talking about at the beginning. We're trying to build something that can actually resist this overwhelming propaganda momentum that's pushed forward by the minority of the conversation. It really is uncomfortable because of how aggressive a lot of this is too. Now, Caitlin Johnstone put out a great post. The Free Thought Project is where I saw this. They put it up as well. Trumpism and anti-Trumpism are both fake decoy revolutions serving the empire. Now, it's a long thread. It's a good read. Make sure you check it out. But think about how important that is to consider. That ultimately, it's everything we just told you. That what they're doing is this is the false dichotomy. This is the two-party illusion in and of itself. They just are reimagining this two-party breakdown in different ways. I think just testing the waters, quite frankly. I mean, whether it's going to be another third-party dynamic or whether, for the last so many years now, it's been basically Trump or not Trump. That's what this whole thing has been. She's making a great point. And all of it serves the empire. Now, I wanted to read this to you. This is something I put out when I'm really actually frustrated about because this video I made, all this is back in 2016. I wrote this out and I made a video. I don't know if you remember this. It was a long time ago, well before the daily wrap-up and all that. And it was basically a video. And by the way, it was at a time when I was not still under the impression that the voting was going to make a difference at the end of the day, at least in the context of the U.S. current situation. Not that, as I said before, voting is paramount in an actual representative government. But I'm mad because I wanted to see this clip again when I stumbled across this. I remember I liked this. And it was a breakdown of the different clips of both left and right, and it showed you the illusion of it all. And as I said, the title is The Election Deception of 2016. See how how consistent ultimately I've been with these arguments, even though I've evolved. I've now come to the conclusion that I don't think voting is it's not even having an effect on the outcome. But I could be wrong, and I leave it to you to decide for yourself. But it's called The Election Deception of 2016, a call to vote your heart. Now, my point at this time was that, again, at the time, thinking voting would make a difference, in my opinion. And I think at the time I was talking about the idea of the third option, and which was, well, look, if we're lied to every time about the polls and everything that happens, which, by the way, was exactly what happened, right? I wrote this before that. What ended up happening? Clinton's going to win 99%. And they lied, right? It was obviously not the reality. So I called that correct at this time. And the point was, which I think a lot of us saw, was the thought I wanted to put in your mind about the third party point of this. Think about me, right? 2016, I wrote this. And the idea is right now, if you think your voting makes a difference, consider this point about how they're driving you into anything. Really, only the two selected options that both lead in the same direction. So I said the entire election process, and please remember this was 2016, and my opinion on voting has changed. This entire election process has been overrun with fraud, corruption, collusion, and deceit. Never before seen, at least to me at that time, or rather, never before revealed in U.S. history. So much so that the rest of the world is at full attention to watch as the American experiment crumbles in real time. Every American is enlisted at a young age and told their vote matters, that even one vote can make a difference. Yet, that entire mantra came crashing down this election cycle when all were told that their vote would only truly matter if and when they vote for one of the two pre-approved state-sponsored candidates. And we're told this would be democracy at its finest. All the same mantras we get every time. Intentionally manipulated polls are thrown out to convince the people that a third-party vote would indeed not count. Yet, despite proof of these manipulations, many continue to fulfill their programming and plan on voting in line. Consider for a moment the previous claim, of which there is ample proof, knowing that the polls being broadcasted by mainstream channels are falsified in order to give you, the voter, the impression that the majority is voting for either Clinton or Trump. And see, my point was not about one or the others, about the third possibility. And I said, consider for a moment the possibility that the actual majority, same point now, if you think your voting matters, could in fact be voting for someone else. Maybe this is the one time that untapped majority that doesn't vote decides to step in. Right? So maybe they are the majority. Maybe they're about to vote in somebody else, Jill Stein, for all we know. And most likely are, or there would be no need to falsify the polls, is what I said at the time. Right? The idea that there is clearly some deviation, so they're trying to lie to you with polls, right? And I said, you then dutifully go off. This is a hypothetical, right? So the hypothetical being that the third party is actually getting momentum in the actual polls. And so they come out and go, don't do that. You're going to throw it away. They got 2%. They're not going to get there. And a lot of people fall for that. So you then go dutifully go off and cast your vote reluctantly because you didn't really want them for the lesser of two evils, which is every time. Because you're going, well, they both suck, but she's way worse or he's more of a maniac. So that's all we get right now. It says, still convinced by the onslaught of propaganda telling you that the age-old adage, every vote counts, only applies when you stay within party lines. Stupid. Then consider that your one vote, as misguided and manipulated as it may be, could in fact be the winning vote that steals away the presidency from a potentially more deserving, better suited, and morally sound third-party option, if you thought that was the case. And all you had to do was vote for who you actually believed in. Oh, God, it's crazy, right? Actually voting for who you like. And realize, I mean, the point that I'm making, as I think is clear, is that what if that ended up being the vote, the one that could have made this happen, and you fell for those dumb polls, voted for Trump or Kamala, and that's what they ended up showing you anyway. And the point is, you could have made a difference if you had actually just followed your heart. And I said, ultimately, to allow the media to control your perception of what is and is not possible in the current election, or what will or will not count based on the current standings, will only lead you to settle for what seems plausible, to vote for their selection, and not for the candidate you truly feel will rescue the America we once knew. And that's an article I wrote a long time ago, probably equally naive about the possibilities, or maybe I'm just more jaded today, who knows? Again, not in any way blackpilled in the concept of not wanting a solution or seeing possible solutions, but just, I think, more honest about the reality of where we are. And in that very point, doing everything we can to find the solution within that bad situation. But I said, so I ask you today, with this nation's future hanging in the balance, I plead with you today to look into your heart and cast your November vote for the candidate you genuinely feel will lead this country into a time of prosperity and change. One who will put the people back in their rightful place as the leaders of this nation. Do not fall for the lesser of two evils ploy. Follow your heart and do what you know to be right. Very important, I thought. Now, again, I've changed a little bit in my perspective, but I still stand by the idea. Do you really want to lean into what they've convinced you is the most plausible reality? Oh, well, the adults in the room will recognize that there's only two choices. Really? I mean, does that even sound like logic? Like, we need to buck that ridiculously controlling narrative. The narrative that's trying to paint people like us as black-pilled people giving up or copping out. I mean, have you been watching? Is that even remotely what we're talking about? You watch as this builds, especially as we try to align with other people who see through it. It represents a threat to what they're doing. I mark my words. So I'm going to probably read this again as we get closer, because I mean, again, even though I believe that it won't translate, I still want people to take the action they believe in. I think that in and of itself will produce positive results within our society. At the end of the day, we'll collectively know that we're being lied to. I think we already do. I think that's why this is so desperate. Now, I also had a great interview. I'm going to leave this open so I don't forget about it. I kind of enjoyed reading that for myself from a while ago, you know. But this is an interview I did with Sam Husseini just on the 24th of August, or maybe 23rd, maybe. But either way, just recently. Understanding vote pacts and how the two-party system protects the status quo. Now, I really enjoyed this. It was about, he's got a thing called vote pact. And I'm very clear, at least somewhat into it. I wanted to make sure we got a good conversation going where I'm like, you know, I really don't think our vote translates. And I wanted to be very upfront about that. And he knows that. That's why we set this up. Because he believes in this and he wanted a genuine challenge on it, right? And I much respect for that, because he knows I'm not going to pull punches. And so we get into this and we talk about it. And I honestly genuinely see this a lot of positive in this. Whether or not you think your vote translates, that what he ultimately gets at is that in this conversation, this could expose the illusion by doing this. Now, the point of it all is the idea, whatever you think the validity of it is, or the possibility that ultimately recognizing that we're being driven into the two-party system, that we can then make a pact with another voter on the other side of the aisle, that we both see the lesser of two evils lie, and you both want to vote for a third-party candidate, whoever that may be. So you make a pact. And you say, well, we're both going to make a deal to both vote for third party. And then ultimately that would mean that it would cancel out the idea that you'd be taking it from the other side. And then you'd also get to vote for who you believe in. And if enough people did this, you could eventually, if you believe your vote translates, maybe see some change. But even if it didn't, if enough people did this, I think it would expose how the two-party system protects the status quo. I think it's a good thing to think about. Consider for yourself, all the information's in here. But here's what he wrote, just to show you what his breakdown is. As Sam puts it, most voters don't vote for, often don't even consider voting for, third parties because they view voting for a third party as helping the establishment party they hate most. Guys, that is like the core value of this election right now. Disenchanted Democrats continue to vote for Democrats because they don't want Republicans. Disenchanted Republicans continue to vote for Republicans because they don't want Democrats. The reason that's become so central is because everyone's falling out of this. So the best thing they got is to say, but they're worse, more than ever before. Because the reality is, if you recognize again, and it's more than 40%, I'm going to argue that the largest voting bloc are people that don't even participate, and then 40% of those that do are independent, it shows you that they're inching, they're already gone. And the best they can do is go, well, crap, if that's all we have, then I got to go with the one that's not as bad. That's wild. But I'm hoping with this conversation, as we get closer, people will begin to see that at the very least, that you should vote for who you actually believe in, let alone maybe take some other action that you think might have more effect. Maybe both. But he finishes by saying both are trapped by fear and loathing. In today's interview, I simply added that we'll discuss how this pact would work, why it will circumvent the typical excuse of helping the other side, and the overall viability of this potential solution. I really respect Sam Husseini, and we don't agree on everything, but I definitely, his work in the State Department and him calling them out, they won't even call him anymore, Anyway, listen to this. I think it's a good conversation to at least open this possibility in your mind. Now, we've talked a lot about this. I really believe that we're in the midst of some intense psychological warfare. And this is the show we did on the 4th of August, U.S.-Israeli fifth-generation warfare, Israeli bots, destabilizing propaganda, and digital regime change. We saw with Venezuela, the building. We saw how this is going to work. I mean, how this is going to work with the election. This is being already set up for chaos. Both sides are justifying how they're not going to accept it no matter what. I think we're engineered into this right now. And I'm hoping that we can see our way away from this if we actually buck the two-choice lie. But either way, this is a big part of what's happening, and it's everywhere. Now, one example of this that I really wouldn't even go to the level of calling this fifth-generation warfare. It's basically just a very rudimentary manipulation. But I just wanted to show you an example of how everywhere this is right now. I thought this was kind of hilarious because of how people are framing this. I guess they just don't run their own websites. They don't know how easy it is to redirect websites to anybody. But this person, it's American AF, 247,000 followers, says, oh my gosh, holy SHLIT, Schlit. Go type this into Google and see what comes up. And it says Antifa.com. And this person goes, what the? And it's the White House website right here. So check this out. From one hand, hold on. Antifa.com. Okay, so you can see it, right? Antifa.com. Hit it, and it redirects to the White House. Now, first of all, it's important to recognize literally anybody can redirect to literally any website. I can set up my website right now, TLAV, to redirect to the White House. It's a 1-2-step process. Very simple. All you do is type in, you go to your back end, you type in regard to where you want the DNS to be pointing, and you redirect it to point at any website. People do that. Like, for example, we're about to switch coming up soon. So we're going to redirect it to a temporary location so you don't have any downtime. You won't know the difference. The point is it's simple. You can redirect it to anything. So what I think is funny about this, somebody's saying, what, read the page? I'm missing something? No, I mean, maybe she wasn't talking to me. I mean, it's .gov, so this is the White House page. Now, anyway, the point is that what they're framing it as is that this is somehow like, wow, look at, like, I guess the point I'm seeing people talk about in the chat, in the comments, like in Twitter, is that like this proves that like the White House is Antifa, or that the Democrats are. I mean, it's this lazy effort, in my opinion, to just make it about how they are that. And to me, it's just simple. It's transparent. You really think that that's them doing that and they got caught? That's just lazy. It's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. What this is, I think very obviously, is somebody who just made a website called Antifa.com and just redirected to the White House. So they could go, whoa, look, the White House is Antifa. It's simple. And it's how easy it is to manipulate people. I think that's ridiculous. So I think my point is that there are people out there who are deliberately lying to you for their truth, or just lying to you for whatever reason. But I do think a huge part of this is about how people are manufacturing what they believe is the truth, that like that's what they are. So by doing this, even though it's a lie, it's in the interest of good. No, that's wrong. That's broken logic. You are lying for yourself. That's what that is. So I just want to be cautious about how at the core level of this, there are people that are being engineered to justify anything as long as your side wins. And then go back to the idea of what we're really talking about, the high level, state level, but also just individuals with abilities to conduct real psychological warfare in very, very serious ongoing ways, some of which are to the level of state level that are justifying genocide. Now, we've talked about this, or manipulating elections. For those that realize that every possible candidate, maybe save for Jill Stein, is blindly pro-Israel, there's a reason for that. The industrial complex, the Israeli election interference and psychological operation industrial complex. This is an article this is a point about a major investigation showing this guy, you can see, who is an Israeli asset, proven, is on the record openly saying that they've manipulated 27 different presidential elections. That's what they're doing. And he works for Israel. How do we not put this together? And he makes a point to say this has happened in the United States. That is the reality. That's why Russiagate was Israelgate. And the evidence they found was never, we all saw it. They just didn't really dive into it. They kept looking toward Russia because the whole point is it's not about, at the end of the day, we're talking about every government trying to do these things. But what we can see on the record, what we can see in every possible dynamic is that Israel is influencing U.S. policy to Americans' detriment. It's not even up for debate. And I'll give you the other articles: weaponized migration and experimentation, tools for subversion, division, and manufacturing consent, and how Israel uses the two-party illusion, like I'm talking about right now, to divide, destabilize, and control policy. It is happening everywhere. Now, let's get into digital IDs. There's 2 points we're going to make. Now, this was about the idea. I mean, I've been pointing at it throughout this conversation. The idea that clearly we are being manipulated into all of it, not just digital IDs, but that's the starting point, I argue, where this will go next. But the idea that they are justifying, rationalizing, as Caitlin's going to tell you right now, all of the same things they were fighting during COVID-19 illusion, but through different wedge issues that make them ignore it. Now, that's how this government works. Not the left or the right, but the government. They do it to all of us all the time. In whatever way is most important and whatever group seems to be most resistant that you get focused on, they manipulate you. That happened during COVID-19. in every possible way. So Sense Receptor points this out. I'm going to play it first, and then looks like he mostly quotes what she says, but I'll read some of it. Now, this is important because Catherine and I are going to have this conversation soon. And the point is that she's been now, based on what RFK Jr. said about Bitcoin, for example, at the Bitcoin rally, it's changed her opinion about all this. And the idea being that at the end of the day, she sees it. She sees the play with Israel, with the Republicans, with all of this. And it's not just about one versus the other. It's about all of them working together to get you in this position.
Because people will say, well, what do you think about the election? What do you think about Biden? And you said they're going to replace him. Tell me why.
They have to replace him.
Why?
They have no choice. They have to. So, and so I think they've been really struggling to figure out, because there's lots of internal politics here about who you replace him with and how that's going to work. And I think they have to replace him.
Because
the problem is the Republicans at this point and Trump are so far in the lead. There's nobody. The only person they can replace him with is somebody who's going to lose. So the question is, who's willing to do the run and who's willing to pay hundreds of millions of dollars, for a loss.
Now, right there is important because what she's saying is that this is an illusion, right? This person is going to step in knowing that they're going to lose. Now, you could take that as that Trump's just so popular. But what she says next, I think, challenges that.
Wow. You don't think they can cheat their way in? You think it's that? Well, Martin Armstrong.
No, it's not bad. But here's the thing, and I'm going to be a bad guy now. Trump is promoting the digital ID and biometrics to deal with the immigration problem. Do not let the Republicans trick you into a control grid.
Oh, very good.
Don't get tricked into cancel the Fed and end up with the BIS and the IMF. Right. Don't get tricked into biometrics and a digital ID to deal with the immigration problem that the federal government created and can absolutely address without all the things, because they're just tricked.
The federal government created. She sees this, guys. I mean, I think it's very obvious. And if we can't recognize how I think the problem is that people just ignore the implications of what they're doing because they just don't want to believe that they would do that. And that's where you get into the worship and the ideologue situation. I know people like that. I remember this during the first administration. The answer would be he wouldn't do that. And my jaw would drop. Well, you don't know this person, for crying out loud. And how do you possibly know that he wouldn't do? And it turns out they did, and there wouldn't be an answer for it. It's like, well, there must have been a reason. And the point is, it's blind acceptance, blind support. That's what we're highlighting. No matter who you're talking about, that's a problem.
Tricking you into a control grid.
That's not a bad thing.
And I hate to say enough. Don't get tricked into biometrics and a digital ID to deal with the immigration problem that the federal government created and can absolutely address without all the things, because they're just tricking you into a control grid.
That's not a bad thing.
And I hate to say it, if you look at who Trump put into the cabinet, he put into the cabinet a lot of people who were basically part of the syndicate that's trying to build a control grid.
Just like last time. But I guess he's going to make the same mistake again, right? Even calling it a mistake is giving him an out. It wasn't a mistake the first time. You don't put Bolton and Pompeo and all the rest of them in those positions and then one by one become his enemies. The reality is that if he was naive enough to let that happen, that should be a problem in and of itself. And I certainly could be that he blindly thought that his own hubris, that he could pick these people and he would be able to control it. End of the day, it was the swamp. Those were the worst possible choice. Same thing's happening right now.
So, before you get enthusiastic about the Republicans, you got to hold their feet to the fire that they better reverse the control grid.
That is great.
Demand that they reverse the control grid. Demand it.
Great information.
Or just don't let them build it to begin with, right? The idea is that I think she's well aware these people are going to vote for these, end of the day, knowing they're going to vote for them, hold their feet to the fire. Don't let them do that. But problem is, when they do, it comes along with a justifying narrative. Well, this needs to be done to stop them, and we promise we won't do X, Y, and Z, and they'll go along with it because they always do. The point is, for those of us that aren't lost in this, but maybe still align with one party or the other, push back with everything you have for all that matters. This is what's important. Actually, I'll just go past this for time, but I think I'm going to finish up with the digital ID point, and I'm going to make a promise I'm feeling like my arm is not that bad right now. It's still a little achy because of it's the time of the setup that kills me. All the computer work right now, I'm just resting in the sling. So I think that tomorrow, my point is I'm going to do a show. I'm going to hold to that. I have most of this already lined up. I'm going to make that happen. I was kind of thinking I was going to let it rest just in hope, but I want to make sure we get this out tomorrow. And it's about the mosquito discussion I was going to get into, but also monkeypox and digital health and all that. So get ready for tomorrow. We're going to make it happen. So this is a great clip that Dr. Ray put out, as well as this one down here. That's it's an excerpt from their discussion, which is not just, this is the important part. He says, we will accidentally walk into a digital ID system. Here's a clip that overlaps with what he said, as well as with what Whitney's been saying in different locations.
We're going to close the border, and we're going to get the crooked ones out, the bad ones out, and we're going to let a lot of people come in, because we need more people, especially with AI coming and all of the different things, and the farmers need, everybody needs. But we're going to make sure that they're not murderers, killers, drug dealers, and the kind of people that we have largely coming in right now.
Of course, the migration situation is being allowed to happen this way. The smart wall has consistently been a bipartisan project. So you have the Democrats creating the conditions to manufacture consent, and it's the two-party illusion. It's the left hand and the right hand. The left hand is creating the problem, and the right hand's going to come in and right into the rescue to solve the problem the left hand has created.
Or vice versa, every time.
And it's the exact same system both hands want.
Right.
And the only winner here is the people that want to create this global technocratic government system that relies on AI mass surveillance to run and control our freedom of movement. It's being sold as this liberty-driven thing that we're going to make America great again and stop illegal immigration and whatnot. But that's not what's going to happen here. We're essentially being herded into what I would argue is sort of a technocratic nightmare, the cornerstone of which is this digital ID agenda, which is meant to be linked to some sort of digital wallet that contains programmable, surveillable money, either a CBDC issued by a central bank or issued by a private bank. And I think ultimately...
That's her point about the whole Jamie Dimon overlap, right? And JP Morgan, and the idea that we're like, well, we resist CBDCs and then go with a private version, right? Which is, it's the same thing, guys. And that's what's happening everywhere. Why she makes her point with the past about total information awareness and LifeLog. It became Palantir as a privatized aspect, and that's Teal for it. It shows you how this typically works. Now with the public-private partnership kind of direction, not just the usual suspects, but like the main suspects in this conversation that are driving all of this are the ones that are backing what's going on with Trump. And then you can add in Miriam Adelson for good measure or terrible measure. The idea that all the worst problems that we can see are all backing what's going on here. But, have the bad guys on the inside or whatever Q would convince you of.
What people need to do is not focus so much on these political saviors being put out in front of us, but focus on what we're going to do to not comply with the digital ID agenda and these other things that they need in order to push us into this world that they've been building. Right. And I would really appreciate it if people would focus on that again, because I think there was a lot of consciousness generated around that during COVID, for example, where people rightly, in my opinion, pointed out that vaccine passports are really sort of a trial run for a lot of this broader digital ID stuff. But, the digital ID stuff is marching full speed ahead. And now in the United States, a lot of the people that were critical of it as vaccine passports are essentially calling for it. I mean, you have people like Trump on the campaign trail saying the U.S. desperately needs a biometric entry-exit system.
Biometric entry-exit visa tracking system, which we need desperately.
I mean, isn't that wild? If they had come out and said we need that to track because of COVID, everyone would lose their minds. But what's the 4 X, Y, and Z is sort of irrelevant. You give them a system set up to monitor you for some kind of justification, it will be used. Obviously. Same point right there. The supporters of him would be like, he wouldn't do that. Well, even if you're right, wait till 4 years. I mean, we can't be this simple. We have to realize he's not on your side. But the point, even if you think, it's eventually going to end up in the hands of people that will abuse you. We cannot allow this to be rolled into the very thing that we all tell you is coming. Even if you end up going, but Trump didn't do it. I don't care at the end of the day. It's happening. We're watching it. And if you think voting in Trump, who wants to do part of what they want to, is going to change that, I just don't know. I don't know how to convince you otherwise when he's literally saying it out loud.
In my administration, we will ensure that this system is in place
And I will tell you, it will be on land, it will be on sea, it will be in air. We will have a proper tracking system.
Yay! They all cheer for that. My God.
And you have this campaign lawyer going on podcasts saying we need to scan our face and our eyeballs in order to be able to vote in the United States. You know,
the point is, imagine it was exactly the same narrative for exactly the same reason it was Biden saying it. I mean, you should laugh about that because you know, as I do, they would be like, no, you're a bad guy, you're a pet, whatever. It would be everything, the right reasons to resist it, but not when Trump does it because, you know, he's the good guy.
if we need voter ID, why can't we just use a physical ID?
Right.
Or something like that. Why does it have to be biometric and digital? And then you see that, you know, the Trump campaign, just like the Democratic Party, are beholden to these Silicon Valley donors. A good example of that would be Trump's recent VP pick, J.D. Vance, who was intimately tied up with Peter Thiel, who created a CIA-funded data mining companies that are surveilling Americans and profiling them for intelligence based on our online activity, and are very much invested in these digital ID agendas and digital wallet agendas, and these programmable, surveillable currencies. And again, I think we need to focus more on what we can do as people and as communities, and not think that we can just sit back in our armchair and just vote, you know, once.
Imagine calling that blackpilled. Listen to what she just said. And this is the point. More than anybody, she's being called blackpilled because she has so much information that she's relaying that is impossible to ignore. So people hear it and it's so overwhelming to them. Like, look at some of these past interviews with Jimmy and the rest of them. They almost just go blank. They don't even know what to say. It's so much that you go, well, like, oh, we're screwed. Well, that's what you say in response, whoever is saying that. A lot of the times that's what they go, well, my God, we're screwed. That's not what she's saying. That's not what I'm saying. We're saying we need to do more than pretend that you check that box, that you're going to change it. We are the only entities, not just us and TLAV or her, but like the people doing this. There's a lot of us, but I think it's the minority, but we're the only ones that are actually going, we need to stop that. We need to do something to stop this from happening. That's change. Blackpilled would say, we're screwed, we're giving up. Again, listen to what she just said.
And again, I think we need to focus more on what we can do as people and as communities, and not think that we can just sit back in our armchair and just vote, you know, once every 4 years or once every, you know, X number of years between election cycles, and everything's going to be magically better. I think people need to take responsibility and think about what we can do as people to opt out of these systems that they're trying to impose on us.
Oh man, she's given up, right? Trust me, guys, there's a reason that I'm stressing this, because it is, it's everywhere in this conversation right now. And there's a very weirdly coordinated effort to frame people like what we're saying as, you know, not just like coordinated shills working for something, but the idea that we've just given up on it, but yet somehow coordinated to work for something else. It's at the end of the day, obviously that's not what she's saying. As people, we need to find what we can do to change this, not just pretend like voting in this broken lie is going to do something. Like, acknowledge the possibility that it's obviously could be that the voting system or the election in general is completely broken. Like, obviously we can acknowledge it's a possibility. I frankly think it's easy to prove, but it's not impossible, right? So this weird idea that by highlighting the fact that it's a broken system and that you have, you know, the illusion of choice as an obvious possibility is somehow being blackpilled into it's simply trying to show people that we are trapped and that what we want is a real solution. And we have all sorts of discussions about what else to do. Like I said, Derek Bros, more than anybody, most of what he does is rooted in how we can actually have positive change outside of some broken voting system. Myself, I lean and I highlight more of the current ongoing situation. That's just what I do in any context. But I also have lots of conversations I've had many times about what else we can do. One of them I always point out is the abstention point, or the idea that I honestly believe that there's a lot of other actions that are more politically active or affecting change than even if you think voting is translating, that then simply vote, checking a box and acting like that's all you need to do. Whether you think it's protesting or going out or doing a show like this, or you're doing, you know, like think tank conversations, having meetings with people and discussing these things. And these things are actually influencing people's opinions. And on top of that, the idea, as I've said before, and a real representative government, which these things could work toward creating again, voting is paramount. So none of us are saying anything different than that. And that's what's so important to recognize is there's a very clear effort to convince you otherwise. Now, this is circulating right now. It's true. Biden administration rushes digital ID plans. Now, it hasn't necessarily happened yet, but I obviously think it will and is. Whoever's in power, I think that's the obvious point. But right now, it's kind of being built that it's the Biden administration, and that's how, even though right at the same time we're talking about this, we've already shown you, largely Republican-driven is the SAVE Act, which is real ID compliant identification with a few other options in there. We'll come back to that. So the point here, wrong one. Okay, so the Biden administration rushes digital ID plans. So my point is simply that they're driving this forward, but it's predominantly around, at the start anyway, was it ML or DL? Oh, maybe the next one. The digital driver's license. That's primarily what this is focusing on to start anyway. Biden administration is working to expedite widespread adoption of digital IDs, including driver's license. The draft executive order indicates. Hasn't happened, the draft, right? But it still seems to be on the way, which nobody should deny. It's obvious. Here's NIST coming out on the 21st saying they released their second public draft of digital identity guidelines for final review. This is no joke, guys. Obviously, this is happening. There's no question. Weirdly enough, they're seeking public comments in the draft through October 7th, 2024. My point is that they're all pushing this. I don't think they care what you have to say about it. It's all just the illusion of some kind of process. August 21st, same thing. This is just the guidelines they put out if you want to read more into it, but it's very clear what this is about. Here is Federal News Network saying NIST opens the opening on digital identity with latest draft guidelines. National Institute for Standards and Technology is trying to give agencies and the public more options when it comes to digital identity and anti-fraud capabilities. White House poised to throw federal support behind MDLs, mobile driver's license. Now, the point is, this is step one. Well, one of the early steps in this process in regard to getting you into digital ID, digital everything, right? So my point in showing you this before going back to the SAVE ID Act, remember the SAVE Act, is the point we made is if you watch the show, it's undeniable. In the documentation, it explicitly says real ID compliant as one of the choices. That is digital ID. Real ID and ID 2020 were on the surface a digital ID push. Now, the point is that one of those was real ID compliant. Then they said some other things, birth certificate and whatever else. So the argument was, well, look, there's other choices. Okay, fair enough. I made the point then that those other choices were a very slim minority of people that were out there. But my point also, with that first point being that they're going to drive most people into it right away anyway. But my point is, on top of that, is this is being put out, and then in a year, a month, something changes, which invalidates those other choices, which is almost always what happens. Okay, that's what this would be. So suddenly they drive this forward. Suddenly now you have a mobile driver's license, but more than that, you have a mobile identification storing device or on your device. That's what this will be. Read about it. For all of your social security card, your drive. Okay. So then you have in a position where they go, okay, well, we no longer take the physical versions of these things. That's what they're going to eventually go to. So what happens when you get to the point in the very near future, hopefully we can stop it, where they go, okay, well, we no longer accept the physical versions. What that means is on the real SAVE ID, or the SAVE Act, then suddenly the other choices you pointed at, the alternatives are no longer there. Even though it's listed in there, it's now going to be amended to go, but now all we have are these digital versions. So my point is, it's obvious. This is a Trojan horse, using the two-party illusion and the election to usher in digital IDs. This is based on immigration and the border. We just showed you they're all talking about the biometric discussion. That's what they're doing. So it's a very easy move to say now you have to use real ID compliant because that's all that's left. Suddenly, it's the law. Guys, this is Republican side of it. This is from Biden side of it. They're all working together, your government, to drive you into what they need to control you. I just don't know how I can make that any more clear. Now, Derek has written a lot for TLAV about the digital ID. This one is exposing the digital ID as a human rights scam. This one's important as the NYU School of Law literally came out and said that digital IDs in general are, quote, paving a digital road to hell. Direct quote from NYU School of Law. It's like everything else, like 5G or whatever else. Like everyone, the people that are knowledgeable in the field are going dangerous. They don't know. Or GMOs, for example. Plenty of intelligent people in the field are going, these are going to hurt you. There's cancer problems. And they go, no, you're crazy. Happened anyway. Whatever happened with that, by the way? What a resounding success that, oh, wait, never mind. It failed and hurt a lot of people, but let's let them do it with injections. Same old dumb thing. We just cycle through these games because they use the partisan conversation to keep you just lost and divided and confused and really settling for what's not as bad as the other. That's not just candidates, guys. That's how this game works. And I'm hoping that this might have reached a few more people. So I'm going to end today with this clip I'm not sure who this is. James Melville shared this, but really I keep seeing a lot of these videos where I'm liking the fact that I'm seeing a lot of younger people who are just having these kind of, as we call it, the come to Jesus moment, right? Or come to Jesus meeting where it's like, you just are like, okay, we need to, reconcile this. We need to acknowledge the reality of what's going on. And you have a lot of these people that are coming to these moments with like, wow, I'm seeing this. It's not one thing or the other. It's the whole damn thing. I think it's important that I think we lean into that. And the problem is right now, even comments that people are like, oh, what a lefty, or everyone, that is the go-to manipulation, I would call it, to get people to ignore truth. Don't listen to that truth. She's a Democrat. Don't listen to what he said. He's a Republican. It's true. If it's true, or at the very least, whether it is or not, you should listen to it so you can decide. So thank you for tuning in, guys. As I said, I'm going to be doing something tomorrow, and I'm going to make sure we talk about the one part I was going to get into next, the GM mosquito overlap. There's a point that's happening in Boston that I think is very relevant with the potential lockdowns that already curfew seem to be happening. I'm going to try to do it early as I can tomorrow, but it's important to see that I think that this, as you've seen us talk about before, the undeniable overlap of the tetracycline aspect of the GM mosquitoes, or the spraying for pesticides that also have an effect on that same conversation, or the dumping of edible vaccines for animals in the wild, which happens all over the place, which also have a tetracycline overlap. The point is, it makes these GM mosquitoes stronger. This is peer-reviewed science. Now, point in that is those things then cause things that I think are being used. And I think it's a manufactured problem, quite frankly, or an experiment. The point is, I want to make sure we talk about this before it explodes into something more that ends up being used for the whole medical freedom conversation, or, calling it another COVID strain, whatever happens, as well as the conversation of monkeypox and just that general overlap, and probably some other stories that pop up tomorrow. So thank you for tuning in today. I appreciate your patience, especially with everything. All the stuff we're dealing with that takes my time away from this, but we care about this. That I care personally about you and what you're doing and the people out there. I mean, I shouldn't say that. You don't know what I feel internally, but that's the truth coming from me, is that it matters to me. It matters to me that people are being lied to. It matters to me that individuals are being manipulated to act against their own interests. It matters to me that there are children literally starving to death as I speak. And in that pause, another child was killed by Israel. That's literally the reality of what's going on. That's not a joke. Right now, as we're talking, there are people being killed with your tax dollars. These things have to matter to us. And I think it's important to drive these into the larger conversation. But I'm thank you for being here and helping what I see as an important effort of, around or outside of the political game that's being played. That's where we all need to get to. Truly acting in what we believe in, what we think are the best interest for everybody, not just, and I will argue there are people within that the problem that in many cases do think that's what's happening. My point is that it always comes up against it, if you walk through it, something that they compromise. Whether it's the other person, the other side, the idea that he said this, but he meant that. Well, it's probably the good. Just ignoring things to drive in what you want to be the reality, despite history showing you that has never seemingly been the case. We, as individuals, are what we need to lean into, right? Lean into what you believe in, your community, the actions and votes that actually make a difference, like voting with your dollar, acting with kindness in your community that then spreads like wildfire, being the person that you want people to emulate. That's what we need to fight for. That's what I hope this community is doing, and I believe it is. So thank you for being the person that you are in helping show other people that it's possible. Thank you for being you. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
We eat the food they give us, vote for one of two people that they tell us to, and watch the movies that they show. They take our attention as soon as we reach age 5, and they never give it back. We go to school for 8 hours a day learning what they want us to. They scold us until we obey, and then they praise us when we do. They make us form a habit of waking up and spending our entire day in a building that we wouldn't choose, so that when we get older, we are willing to do the same. Following orders becomes comfortable when we spend our childhood doing what we're told. So when we're older, we hesitate to stray outside the norm. They tell us that we should do anything we can to attend a university, because if we don't, we will fail. They manipulate us into financial dependency at a young age so that we stay liable to the system. They've given us a currency that only has value because they say it does, and we receive it by working at a business that they own. Their millions become billions while the rest of us are forced to sacrifice our time for a minuscule fraction of what our work gains for them. They provide us housing, but make it costly so that we struggle to accumulate enough wealth to escape their system. Our supermarkets are full of brands that they possess, to the point that it is difficult to find ones that they don't. Our meals are either purchased from a store that they most likely own, or created with ingredients from their brands. They tamper with the food they give us and pump them with toxic and addictive chemicals. They make the most harmful foods the cheapest and most convenient so that it becomes an offer that we can't refuse. Over time, we become addicted in many more ways than one, and they bombard us with temptation on every billboard or commercial. When we get sick from excessive consumption of this insubstantial food, we are forced with almost no other option but to give up financial solidity for the sake of our health. We pay thousands to facilities that they own so that they can prescribe us more harmful chemicals that simply numb the symptoms. They revolve society around addictive foods that cause disease and expensive drugs that mask them, so that we stay in a forever grasp of their system. We only ever consume content that they provide. Our news channels are operated by them to persuade us into two opposing perspectives, so that we never share a same opinion. Why do you think it's free? They feed us shocking news headlines that provoke emotion and grab our attention away from what's really going on in the world. They've granted us with superficial idols that portray luxurious lifestyles, so that we strive to be like them and associate money with happiness. They keep us focused on worldly problems that they've created to keep us zoomed in on our physical reality and detached from our Creator. If we keep our attention on what's going on around us, we will never be present and see the truth of God within us. The villain who runs the world knows the truth of our potential, and it's in their best interest to keep us distracted and willing to submit to a system that thrives on fearful compliance. Imagine if every person on this planet believed that we were created for a reason. We would unlock an unbreakable faith within ourselves and reverse the pyramid of power in which society was built. We would see past the lie that we've been living and turn to each other for help rather than depending on our corrupt leaders. Corrupt leaders who have accumulated a discrete monopoly that succeeds in circumventing the eyes of those who are unaware through the illusion of choice. The majority of us see the world as it is portrayed, diverse, coincidental, and plausible. To someone who lives day by day without taking a step back, the world kind of seems to make sense. Then we look behind the curtain and see that it really makes sense. Where there is one lie, there is many. Once we see one lie, we will find ourselves on an endless spiderweb of mass deception. The blindfold tied around us in childhood will loosen and light will be shed on our fabricated reality. Those in charge of us do not have our best interests in mind and never did. It has been a power trip from the start, and we have gone along with it since the birth of society and will continue to until we see a reason for change and stop pointing fingers at each other.